All right, so it is 5:30, and we will call the Round Rock Independent School District Board of Trustees regular board meeting to order. It's Thursday, September 17th. We do have a quorum. Trustee Moses is with us virtually. Trustee Gonzalez is absent today. We will start with the Pledge of Allegiance and the Texas Pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible. All right, thank you. Now we will have our public comments regarding items on the agenda. At each board meeting, the board will set aside time to afford the general public an opportunity to speak on items on the agenda. Concerns or complaints regarding specific individuals should not be raised in public forum. They should be considered separately according to applicable board policies. The board requests that comments, whether positive or negative, be courteous and respectful. I would like to remind the audience and the viewers that the comments of the speakers reflect their own positions or opinions. No audience member will be permitted to engage in any conduct that is disruptive or threatening toward any speaker or other person. Each speaker will be given 3 minutes to address the board. Mr. Math will be the designated timekeeper. He will hold up a sign when there are 30 seconds left and when time is up. The first speaker is Peter Bradford. Mr. Bradford, you are up. Can you hear us, Mr. Bradford?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. You have 3 minutes.
3 minutes starting when? Sorry.
Right now.
Okay, so you'd like me to begin?
Yes, sir.
All right, I'm happy to. Thank you guys for your time and dedication to our children's education and health. I'm Peter Bradford, and I have 1 child at Canyon Vista Middle School and 2 at Spicewood Elementary. We've received very positive feedback from our kids at Spicewood. They enjoy the interaction with teachers and classmates. They enjoy outside breaks twice a day, and most of all, they enjoy the classroom teaching from their teachers. Our son at Canyon Vista Middle School has the exact opposite experience, and I think it's because of the setup of the overall education. After the first, second, and third days, he's really not wanted to go back. In-person learning for him, it's still virtual learning, and it's more like in-school suspension, or in some ways, almost like going to a prison. His pod of 6 kids with has 2 adults that interchange. And after the third day, I'd just like to highlight a few of the challenges that they've had. There's really been no opportunity to move or go around outside after 3 days of class. I think he reported 15 minutes of opportunity to actually get daylight. They walked outside, they walked around the track, they came back in. And of course, in the room itself is just one I think window, and the shades are drawn. You guys know that vitamin D is good at preventing COVID, so I'm not sure that that's really healthy for the kids. There's also no interactions with peers in his pod. They cannot during asynchronous time connect with each other, talk about the value of the lessons, teach each other, learn from each other. There's also no interaction with teachers online. This is a really critical point. The teachers that are teaching in the classroom, of course, have their own classes and they're not related to the kids in the room itself, and so they require and need silence. And so kids that are in class online on their laptops with the headphones on are not even allowed to really talk to their teachers to answer questions.
30 seconds.
The fact that all the boys in his particular pod are in choir, and you can imagine what choir is like without even being able to interact with the choir director. Right? It's basically they're all in a one-way lecture in person, which I think they could get from another entirely different experience. We also heard from the lead pod teacher. It's been very difficult for them. And so we have their considerations in mind. There's got to be a better way.
Time.
Go ahead.
That's your 3 minutes, sir. Thank you. Our next speaker will be Alan Talkington.
Yeah, hi, thanks. So when I was kind of prepping to talk to you guys, I was going to start with really kind of my frustrations, and I was going to go a little bit negative on this, but I'm not going to start that way with the very first kind of paragraph that I wanted to shape this with. What I will say is that the very first day of school was absolutely less than ideal, and I hope that you all recognize that as well. A little bit about me, though. I manage teams spread across the country within 4 different time zones. So when we all went work from home, I pulled my team together and I told them, I said, nothing is going to change within how we support our customers, except for the fact that we're not going to be seeing them in person for a bit. I let them know we're going to work harder than we ever have before. I told them we're going to use every technology available. We're going to respond quickly, stay organized, and that our flight to quality is not going to suffer. On top of that, we actually worked on a concurrent plan on how they're going to return to the office, even though we did not know when that was going to happen. You all, though, have had since March to prep the schools to get prepared to return. But instead, and I'm going to use the words of Steve Flores on Facebook, March 13th to September 10th made for the longest spring break in history. So it certainly feels like you guys have taken that entire time off because the flight to quality has drastically suffered. It also feels like you all wanted to purposely extend spring break for our middle and high school students because, as Peter said just a second ago, it is not a very good feeling what these poor kids are having to go through when they're sitting in person. And as a result, many of the students, if y'all haven't noticed, within the first day have returned back. So I was actually born and raised in Round Rock. I was educated through Round Rock. This used to be one of the most highly regarded school systems probably in the entire area, which is why we purposely moved here to have our kids start with the schools. Unfortunately, that has, in my opinion, gone downhill very quickly over the last couple of years. And unfortunately, I look around our school district and other districts that are around us. They've all figured this out, and they figured out how to get back in person. What I do want to do is just thank the teachers. I know that they're working really hard. This is not on you. This is actually on the board in Flores. I also want to give you guys a little bit of advice around Facebook. So recently, Flores just posted that he went to a UT football game in person with thousands of people. That same day, my wife and I both sat down with our kids
30 seconds.
after working full weeks to go through all of the missing things that they had that were left. And we also spent time making sure that we taught them and that they got in there. And unfortunately, we missed the game. So if you're going to be in a public figure type setting like that,
Sir,
use
can we
common
keep it
sense and
to
practice
the
what
school
you preach.
district?
What I certainly expect is that you're going to either do what you want the kids to be doing, right, which is distancing, being at home, or we're all going to go off and have fun, and the kids should be able to return to school.
Time.
And then, time?
Yeah. Thank
Sorry.
you. Our next speaker is
Madam President,
Jennifer Butler.
those of us online, one, we cannot see you, and we can barely hear you. So if there's a camera that you can turn on so everyone can see y'all, it'd be great, as well as perhaps speak up, because I know it's hard to hear when you say time, and it's also hard to hear when you say go. So
All right.
just a thought there.
Thank you, Mr. Moses. Our next
Just to let you know, I don't start the timer until the first word comes out of the person's mouth.
All right. Our next speaker is Jennifer Butler. Is she I don't see her on the list of participants. So we will go to Madison Talkington.
Hi, I'm a junior at Cedar Ridge High School. I love school. Ever since the first day of freshman year, I was sad I only had 4 years left. And now that time has been shortened even more. I'm now a junior. I only have 2 years left, and the sport I was most looking forward to last year was cut short. I had just made varsity starter in water polo. I had worked my butt off all year for it to be taken from me because of something with extremely low risk. I don't even know if we're going to have a season this year because of how quickly all the adults are changing their minds. I don't get an opinion, though. I'm only a teenager. How could I possibly understand that the choices being made on my behalf are ruining my high school experience and career? So far, we've had about a month of online school, and I've cried almost every day. The only thing I've learned is that I don't have very good Wi-Fi. I've grown up not being great with technology, but because of my generation, I'm expected to be an expert. But I'm worse than my grandparents, and I'm still made fun of to this day. I've always been an A/B student, and I've always worked my hardest, but with online school, I know I'm going to fail, no matter how hard I try. I'll always continue to do my best, but it's difficult when you know even your best won't be enough. I already have missings in half of my classes because the online school is so unorganized and the teachers don't know what they're doing. I have friends whose teachers don't even hold class. It's clear to me that my education should be face-to-face in school with a teacher that's actually teaching the class. I understand that we can physically go to school now, but it's still online school, just more stressful, which I didn't even know was possible. Some of my friends went to school the first day and changed their minds because of how pointless it was. I don't support online learning at school. I'm a 16-year-old woman. I don't need to be babysat while staring at a computer screen. If I'm willing to go back to school, I should have the opportunity for it to be real school where I'm able to learn and be taught, not daycare. The only reason I'm sitting here staring at a screen all day, every day, so that I can be part of the swim team, even with our trashy pool. It's sad that so many of us are putting up with this just so we can play sports. I'm a 4.0 student, currently failing 3 of my classes, and the decisions you are making are putting my future at risk. Thank you.
Thank you, Madison. Our next speaker is Brian Parker.
Hello there. Thanks to the board. Okay. Like most English teachers, I love literature and stories, but in recent years, I've become convinced by data that suggests that most people do almost no fiction reading. In fact, almost no reading at all for enjoyment after they leave high school. Instead, students need experience reading nonfiction text, parsing information in technical language, thinking analytically. After all, it's an ever-evolving world and job market built on the tech industry. However, as Cedar Ridge, my school, confirms its first positive case of COVID today, Westwood High School yesterday, and as teachers across the nation have died since returning to the classroom where they likely contracted the virus, I'm reminded that literature and stories teach us about things data cannot. Stories teach us to see the world through a perspective that is not our own. Literature teaches us the power of imagination and of empathy. Many people seem to believe it won't be them. And statistically, you're right, it probably won't be you. And you'll probably be okay. But that's not the whole story, because it will be someone, and they won't be okay. As a culture, we seem to lack the simple skill of imagination. Imagine it's your child, your mother, coughing on their deathbed. I've been so alarmed by the toxic rhetoric batted about by some parents that teachers are cowards who don't want to do their jobs. Teaching is inherently selfless. Every teacher I know is incredibly selfless, usually to a fault. They sacrifice so much of their personal lives for their students and their jobs. Why would all of that have suddenly changed? While I'm somewhat concerned for my safety and I would prefer not to contract COVID, my real concerns do not begin and end with me. I am concerned for our students, for the parents and grandparents of our students, especially those living in multi-generational homes, for our community as a whole. As I've said here previously, the distance ineffective teaching methods in schools are not a product of virtual learning, but of the virus itself, and they will not change until there is a vaccine or until the virus is much more contained. When I hear parents or students complain about our current environment, I hear that they wish very badly that we were not amid a pandemic, but the reality is that we are. We all wish this situation were different. I know I do. I hear that they want something for their very own singular child. They want to play sports. They want to be not in a pandemic. And I'm a parent as well. I understand that impulse, but we must consider other families, other children, people at risk, other members of society. We are risking so much when we can educate just as effectively, at least during the time of COVID, when we have to be socially distanced, from the safety of our homes. The board and the administration need to take immediate and decisive action to move our plans in a way that minimizes any staff or students on campuses until a vaccine is viable, and to give educators the same option being extended to parents and students. The lack of empathy is disappointing, and I hope we don't have to tell the story of the senseless death of a beloved Round Rock teacher that could have been easily avoided. Thank you.
Thank you. And that is the last of our public comment. We will now move into item E, closed session. Pursuant to Texas Government Code 551.071, the board will meet in consultation with legal counsel on McNeil High School construction project and Cadence McShane Construction Company. Pursuant to Texas Government Code 551.071, the board will consult with its attorney regarding CA number 120 CV 496 LY Round Rock ISD et al. Versus Sophia M. BNF Amy M. Pursuant to Texas Government Code 551.071 and 551.074, the board will consult with attorneys to discuss the duties, roles, and responsibilities of a public officer and employees. It is 5:46, and we are going to go into closed. All right, it is 6:20, and we are back into open session. Are there any motions coming out of closed? Mr. Math.
Yes, thank you, Madam President. I move to authorize Escamilla and Ponick.
Board, we cannot hear the board.
Oh, okay. Just a minute. Okay, can you hear us now? All right.
Yes.
Then I'm gonna I called us back into open at 6:20, and we have a motion coming now from Trustee Math.
Thank you, Madam President. I move to authorize Escamilla and Ponick to jointly represent the district and its employees Matt Groff and Antonio Lott in special education litigation described as cause number 1:20-CV-496-LY, Round Rock ISD et al. Versus student SM, BNF Amy M. in the U.S. District Court for the Western District of Texas, Austin Division, to waive any potential conflicts in such joint representation.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to authorize joint representation. Is there any further discussion of the board? I don't see any other discussion. So all those in favor, raise your hand. All right, passes 6-0. Thank you. All right, we are now to item G, our public hearing on Round Rock ISD's 2019-2020 School Financial Integrity Rating System. Dr. Flores.
Yes, thank you, Madam President. I also want to thank this board for its history of fiscal management and fiduciary responsibility that has put us in an elite point in districts across the state of Texas with our first rating. So tonight's report will be another great report provided by Dr. Kenneth Oddix. So without further ado, Dr. Oddix.
Yes, thank you, President. We are members of the board and Dr. Flores. I'm happy to report, and we'll go through each of the slides here in a second, but we got our first report. We had the superior rating, and out of a potential score of 100, we scored 100, so just like last year, so couldn't do any better than that. Jennifer, if you could put the slide deck up, please. Okay, so the first acronym stands for the Financial Integrity Rating System of Texas. Each district in the state does this each year. The 1920 first report is actually based on the 2018-19 financial results, so it's kind of a year behind. But if you'll step to the next slide, please, and actually go to the one where, so of the 15 different ratings or different questions that get answered Indicator 1 is, did we file our financial report on time? It's due by December 28th. We turned it into the TEA November 22nd, so we were fine with that one. If you go on to the next one, Jennifer, then the audit was clean, so unmodified opinion, everything was fine on the audit that was done. And just FYI, our audit firm, Maxwell, is working on our audit for last year's results, so that's in the works right now. Next one, please. Then there were no instances of material weakness in the financials, so we're fine with indicator 2B. Go to the next, and then all of our debt payments, we make semi-annual debt payments on our bonds. One payment is done on February 1st, the other one is August 1st, and we made those on time, so there was no problem with that. Then all of our payments to government entities were done in a timely manner, so we're fine on that one. On indicator 5, that one is no longer scored, so that's not part of the equation this year. On indicator 6, the number of days of cash on hand at the end of our fiscal year, which ended June 30, 2019, we had right at $267 million of cash. On expenditures of $432 million. So our level of cash to cover our expenses was fine. We got full credit for that, the full 10 points. Then what's called our current ratio, the ratio of current assets to current liabilities. We had over 4 times as much current assets as we did current liabilities. So we had plenty of assets to cover our current liabilities. Next, in terms of long-term, our ratio of long-term liabilities to total assets was only like just under 0.6, so we're healthy there from a leverage standpoint. Then our general fund, did that exceed expenses? Had total revenue of $452 million, expenses of $432. So in that fiscal year, we had about $19 million of excess funds that year, so we were fine on that indicator. And our debt coverage ratio to meet our debt service requirement, basically to put it into perspective, our debt payments each year right now are about $100 million in terms of repaying our principal and interest on our debt. We have about $1 billion of outstanding debt, and as of right now, about $300 million of interest to repay that debt. But what we take in property tax has been enough to make our debt payments each year. Then indicator 11, and this speaks to what our level of overhead is on administrative cost, basically looking at what is administrative cost in relation to overall cost. And TEA has an overall guideline that for a district our size, or a district that's more than 1,000 or 10,000 ADA, they look to say if your administrative cost ratio is below 8.5%, they view that as acceptable. Well, we were significantly under that. We were less than 5%, so we got full points for that indicator. Then next, did our student to staff ratio decline over the 3 years? It didn't. There's another question that's a kind of an either or on that of did your student enrollment decrease? Well, we increased students, so we were fine on both of those indicators, indicator 12. Then this looks to how closely does your PEIMS data that gets submitted, how close is that to what is actually reported in the annual financial report. And so total expenditures are $433 million. The sum of all the difference across all of that was $452. So that's just from rounding. So what we told TEA and PEIMS matched up, for all intents and purposes, identically to what was shown in our annual financial report. So very happy about that. On indicator 14, the external auditors indicated that there weren't any material non-compliance for any of the grants or contracts, so we were fine with that one. And then indicator 15, that just deals with the district not receive an adjusted repayment schedule. We've never had that, so we were fine with that one. So like I kind of started up again with, total potential was 100 points. We scored 100, and so that's the highest rating that you can get of superior achievement on that. So then in addition to those rating criteria, then they also look at a couple of other things. That's what the scoring is based on, but then they also look at a couple of other things. So Jennifer, if you go to the next slide. Then they asked to report what each of the board members' expenses were in the most recent year that ended June 30th for each of the board members and also Dr. Flores. And so you see that broken out there. This first report is as part of the board packet and is online for anybody that would like to see it. But you see what each one of the expense categories are broken out by: hotel, mileage, parking, transportation, meals, other, and then in total. So that's laid out by trustee as well as the superintendent. Then next is were there any business transactions? There weren't any between any of the board members and any business. Next, then the superintendent contract is online, so that just as part of the first report, they want to be sure that anybody that wants to see what the contract is, that's always on our website. And if you click on that link, it would take you to Dr. Flores's current contract as well. So nothing but good news in terms of the first report. It's an annual requirement that each district does this, but just wanted to share that with you. I'll be happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Mr. Chadwell?
Thank you, Dr. Ardix. So on page, I think you talked about it on page 13 or 14, I'm not sure. I was kind of looking down, but you said we have $1 billion. You have $1 billion in debt, $100 million a year in payments, principal and interest, and what was it, $300 million?
The interest on the principal.
Oh, total that will be paid out over the 25 years, or
right. Yeah. So
expected?
Like our most recent bond that we sold, the voters back in November of 18 approved a little over a $500 million bond. We sold all of that authorization in 2 bond sales last year, so all of that $500 million became roughly, literally, for all intents and purposes, half of our outstanding debt is the 2018 bond. And then with any of the other outstanding bonds, just like if you and I go to the bank and borrow money, well, you've got to repay, that plus interest. And so when we borrow money through the bond, then we've got to repay the bondholder interest on that debt. So we've collectively have $1 billion worth of outstanding principal, outstanding bond debt. And then over the life of those bonds, and the most recent ones that we sold were over a 15-year life. We shortened up the payment history. Historically, the district has done 25 years. We're now doing it for 15 years, so you significantly lower your interest expense by doing that. Perspective, when we sold that last year, had we financed that same $500 million over a 25-year period of time, the taxpayers ultimately would have paid over $100 million more in interest expense than not changing the tax rate, leaving the tax rate where it was, but financing that over a 15-year. We saved ourselves, our taxpayers, over $100 million with that one decision alone.
Okay. I think I heard some of that. I just wanted to repeat. I'm glad you repeated that for us. Thank you.
Okay, sure.
Mr. Math?
I don't have a question, but I wanted to remind speakers to keep their masks on even when asking questions.
Thank you. That is important. I just had one quick question. I'm jumping the gun just a little bit, but I know when we get to our action items for consent, you're asking for a waiver, and it is the waiver for the report that's kind of also part of this report, right? And will that affect our score next year? No, it's totally different.
Right. Now, that has nothing like the change in for the current. Like I said, Maxwell is working on the audit of last year's financial results for 1920, and that's simply something that is offered to any district that wants to do it. With COVID and all that brings in, they've simply delayed the requirement of the timing of when you have to have the audit completed by. And so that's all that waiver is about. It has nothing to do, this is in the rearview mirror. Nothing that we do now would have any impact on.
Oh, yeah, I guess I was just thinking going forward,
Right.
like
No,
next
no,
year,
no,
it doesn't
no,
affect
no,
us? Okay.
No. Yeah, that is literally a legal, a legal option that it'll have no adverse impact.
All right, thank you. Mr. Moses, I didn't see you raise your hand, but just double checking. Okay. All right, I don't see any other lights on. So thank you, Dr. Audix.
Thank you.
And now we will go to Superintendent's report. Dr. Flores, Reimagining Education.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. We do have two items in the superintendent's report, and the first item is a COVID update of Reimagine Education. This was a truly historical week in Round Rock ISD over the last 7 days. We've been able to welcome back 30% of roughly 30% of our students, so we're really excited about that. So we commend our teachers, our administrators, our entire staff to get there. Also tonight, you heard speakers that talked about the middle and high school experience, and we understand their frustration. I feel their frustration. But at the same time, one of the things that we will continue to do is focus on what best decisions our health experts, science, and data says. And I get it. I know there's a lot of people who believe that there's no such thing as a pandemic, or if there is a pandemic, it's not really detrimental to students and so forth. What I will say is that regardless of where people believe, one of the things we've got to do is develop a plan that allows for our teachers and our students and our administrators to feel as safe as possible. So we acknowledge that, and tonight's report will kind of review over some of those items, and hopefully, I've said this before, if there's a perfect plan out there somewhere in the United States or in the entire world, please send it our way. But I commend our staff, I commend our students, and I commend our entire community for their patience and understanding during these challenging and unprecedented times. So without further ado, we're going to get started with staff presentation, and we'll kick it off with Dr. Presley. Dr. Presley.
Thank you, Dr. Flores, President Weir, members of the board. I appreciate the opportunity to come to you again tonight to talk about our Back to Better plan, our COVID update for tonight. The first slide, if you'd go to the first one. The one after the cover, yeah. This is a slide you've seen before with our phases built in, phase 1, phase 2. We've just moved into phase 3, which this past Tuesday we have kids who have chosen and families who have chosen to come back in person, return to our campuses. We had over 11,000 students return this week to our campuses for in-person, on-campus learning. And so that's been quite a success. I've been to a number of campuses. I want to thank the trustees who were able to go to some of them with me. I appreciate you accompanying me and going to see what was actually happening. Our area soups, principals, teachers have done an amazing job navigating the protocols and the new standards that we have in place as we continue to move through this national or international pandemic. So very pleased with what I'm seeing, but we are still in phase 3 right now. And what we're focused on is phase 4. And I think there's several things that folks need to understand is that, as we've indicated before and then again tonight, the biggest calibrator for that are the health conditions and what we're allowed to do, what we think we're safe to do. We are working with an abundance of caution for safety, not just for our students, but for our staff as well. So we share information regularly with schools in the area, schools across the state, and even nationally to kind of compare notes. How are you doing this? What are you doing with that? To keep our students as safe as possible. But I want to be very clear that parents who have chosen virtual learning for the first 9 weeks have the liberty to change their mind at the end of that first grading period. So on October 19th, when we begin the second 9 weeks, we're really unsure what that looks like, because you could have a campus that has all their students wanting to come back in person at that point, which changes a lot of things that are happening on campus and how we're going about things. Or we may have some campuses that have fewer kids, some more kids decide to go virtual. So that's the challenge, I think, that all of our campus administrators are working with. And I would say probably the biggest challenge is we're doing fine right now. As Dr. Flores indicated, we've successfully brought back over 11,000 kids to our campuses. But as that number grows, and not having any idea what that number is until right before they return, we'll get more information from our parents closer to that date. but that's a pretty short time to rebuild or reorganize a master schedule on any campus, and it creates some challenges. And a lot of the health protocols and things we have in place on campuses right now could change somewhat at that point, because we have to allow any student who wants to come back in person to return in person. So I just want to be very clear on that. So once again, the health conditions will kind of dictate what phase 4 looks like, as well as scheduling issues and the number of students. A big part of that is the number of students who are wishing to return. You can go to the next slide, Jennifer. So as I said, we had over 11,000 students return in person this week, and mostly successfully. What I've seen on all the campuses I've visited, and I've been to almost 24, 25 campuses, is that every campus has some kids that have shown up who chose virtual that for some reason they're wanting to come back on campus. We're allowing our principals to navigate that. We're sticking to the people who signed up for in-person, but every campus, I think, has some kids showing up who want to come in person now. And if the situation mandates it, they're allowing the students to return. We've also had some kids on campuses who signed up for in-person, came a day or two, and decided they wanted to go back home. So it's kind of a moving population of students across the district on those who have chosen and changed their mind already, or those who chose and changed their mind and wanted to come in person when they originally wanted to be virtual. September 15th, our first day on Tuesday of in-person learning, some time was spent that day going through all the safety protocols. A lot of students brought their own devices, and some of the devices that we had issued to them they're bringing back have to be onboarded on the campus. So there was some time spent on that, along with their regular instruction that day, to make sure that they understood what the protocols would be on campus and how to function. Which bathroom do you go to? When do we have breaks and all that sort of thing. So that was a part of that first day to return. And as we return more students, we'll have to go through those protocols yet again at the end of the grading period when we have students come that have been virtual up until that point. We've also, and I mentioned this the last time we did this presentation, that we've had a real success with a lot of people helping out across the district. So we've had the transportation workers who we're not running all of our routes to the full extent, that have been deployed on campuses to help with whatever they needed to be helping with, supervising kids, monitoring different classrooms or pods or lunchrooms, and just helping with supervision in a big way. So I applaud our folks in food service and transportation who had employees that were assigned to campuses to come and help. Also, the Round Rock Opportunity Center, which serves only secondary kids, their entire staff was deployed across the district at our middle schools and high schools to fill gaps in teaching. A lot of those folks are certified teachers teaching classes and helping out any way they can. So I saw a lot of teamwork this week and going to those campuses of how everybody's pulling together to make everything work under these unusual circumstances. So with that, I'll turn it over to Sharon Wilkes. She is our Area Director of Academics for the Round Rock Learning Community, and she's been assigned right now also to be our district COVID coordinator. So Sharon works closely with Brandy Hafner and Terry and his department with PPE and other things that we need, as well as our area superintendents and principals, to make sure everybody has what they need and everyone's staying as safe as possible. So Sharon has a few slides tonight that she would like to share with you.
Thank you, Dr. Presley. If you'll turn to the next slide. Good evening, President Weir, Dr. Flores, and members of the school board. I wanted to provide you with an update regarding the work that we've been doing in response to the virus. I am so very thankful to work in a district with such amazing people. Our principals, our COVID contacts, our teachers, our nurses, our custodians, our bus drivers, our cafeteria workers, and other district personnel have worked tirelessly to ensure the smooth transition to phase 3 of school reopening. I have had the opportunity to be on campuses as well, and I've seen firsthand the students wearing their masks, following the floor decals that are marked 6 feet apart in the hallways for safety. I've also seen that teachers, they've set up these inviting classrooms and amazing spaces so that our students feel welcome and safe. Our staff and our students have adjusted to such vast changes so conscientiously, and our parents are supporting a safe reopening of our campuses, ensuring that our students come to school with their masks and having been screened at home. I'd like to shift for just a moment from what we've been doing on the campuses to what we're doing for the district department safety protocols and explain how we provide a safe environment for all district personnel. Each department has a COVID contact who attends regular meetings with the Director of Health Services, the Director of Custodial Services, and myself. We've shared a district reentry training presentation with them that discusses how to clean high-touch areas and things like PPE expectations. Like the district reentry plan and the campus staff reentry plan that contained very consistent information for all, teachers were also provided with a student reentry training that was specific for their kids who returned to in-person learning. 2 different student reentry training presentations were created, one for pre-K through grades 5 and another for grades 6 through 12. These presentations included safety videos, arrival and dismissal procedures, lunch procedures, PPE expectations, including mask expectations. Our mask expectations are on the district website, on each campus website, and they're in the Reimagining Education Plan. Masks are required for all staff and students in grades pre-K through 12. Face masks are not required for students who have severe autism or with extreme developmental delay, or have an approved mask accommodation on file with the school administration. We also shared in the reentry presentations the importance of daily health screenings, and our campuses and our district offices have been provided with information about screening essential visitors. All visitors will be screened, and those who are allowed into the building for their essential reasons will have their temperature taken. You'll go to the next slide, please. We spent much time ensuring that our campuses had what they needed, and then we turned our attention to our district offices. Plexiglass has been provided for receptionists who encounter visitors in the district offices. That includes our administration building, the Brushy Creek complex, the technology center, and the human resources department. All staff members received masks, hand sanitizers, and cleaning products for their office space. It's important to understand also how our community will be notified of lab-confirmed positive cases. This is one of the things that I get asked a lot about. How do we notify the community when there is a lab-confirmed positive case? So the health authorities recommend that we notify only when there's a lab-confirmed case, not for students who are simply showing symptoms, as there's so many symptoms that could be many other things other than a lab-confirmed COVID. Any student, parent, or staff member who's been in close contact with a lab-confirmed case will receive a telephone call as well as a letter to notify them that they were in close contact. The Williamson County's and City's Health Department defines close contact as being directly exposed to infectious secretions or being within 6 feet for over approximately 15 minutes, irrespective of mask status. Part of the process that we use to make notifications includes reviewing the campus sign-in sheets, the Raptor system, the card access or badge-in report, the cafeteria seating chart, and the smart tag system with transportation, so that we can ensure we notify everybody who was within close contact. A district letter will go out to all community members via our email notification system for all lab confirmed cases at a specific campus. Staff will be notified via the staff email group. In addition, we're excited to let you know that a district COVID-19 dashboard will be available beginning this Friday. It will include information about numbers of lab confirmed cases and close contact cases. Maritza Gallega, our Associate Director of Communications and Community Relations, is going to provide more information about this dashboard a little later in the presentation. At this time, I'll turn it over to Brandy Hafner, our Director of Health Services.
Good evening, Dr. Flores, President Weir, and members of the board. Thank you for putting up the next slide. So the health conditions in both counties are trending in a positive way. While we still wait to see how the spike after Labor Day and the spike after the kids starting on campus will affect the numbers. We continue to be in stage 3 for Austin Public Health. We've been in for the last couple of weeks, allowing for on-campus population of up to 50%, so that's positive. The incidence rate in Austin is a 7.5 out of 100,000, which is good. And their positivity rate was updated. This slide has the last numbers on it. It was updated yesterday with the September 11th date. It's still around the same. It's 4.8 now. This says 4.6. As far as the Williamson County data goes, we're in phase 2, which is the yellow phase. We're happy about that. That allows us to have on-campus activities recommended with the safe opening principles. Incidence rate is lower in Williamson County with 2.9 out of 100,000 people, and their positivity rate is 6.6. Williamson County, I just wanted to make a quick note. Williamson County has had a very low positivity rate listed for the past 2 days, around 2%, but I didn't change the slide to reflect that. The daily update from Williamson County said yesterday that due to an influx of almost 6,000 backlog cases from DSHS, that their positivity rate is artificially low. So they expect it to go back up to the 6.6-ish range. I noted this, with this noted change in the report, I just thought it was best to keep the number on the slide as it is, because I wanted to portray a clear picture of what's happening over the previous 13 days. And that the previous 13 days seem to reflect that. It makes sense to mention it tonight just for the sense of transparency. But anyway, I didn't want to give legitimacy to that false number. At this point, Maritza Gallega is going to talk about the dashboard. I'll hand it off to Maritza.
Thank you. So yes, as Sharon said, we're excited to announce that our dashboard is expected to be available sometime tomorrow afternoon. Once available, we'll be sending out to our community an announcement with the link that they can use to access it. So what our community can expect to see on the dashboard is an overview of district and campus data related to the positive cases and reports of close contact. It's important to note that the data is specific to on-campus learners and employees and will be grouped into 2 major categories of data. So there's current, which represents student and employee cases for that week, and cumulative, which is the total active and inactive cases for student and employee cases. So that's just the total in general. The dashboard will be updated by Health Services every Friday, but as Sharon said, campuses will continue to receive data as confirmed cases are confirmed, and so the entire campus community will be receiving those. And the records on the dashboard will represent from September 10th on. So it's very straightforward. It's very responsive. It offers a very comprehensive overview of just the 2 big points of data for all of our campuses. So yes, we've spent all week developing it, and we're excited to share that with our community so they can have access to that, and so they can expect to receive communication sometime tomorrow afternoon. And now I think at this point, I think Dr. Audix will take the budget portion.
So our expenses so far this fiscal year, which started July 1, we've incurred roughly $800,000 of actual expense, and then encumbered, which basically means we've committed to buy something, it just hasn't been paid for yet, is another $1.5 million. And you see what those various categories of things we've purchased, everything from hotspots, technology, software, to cleaning supplies, germ blast treating the campuses and all of our buildings, have been the major components. Then Trustee Vessa asked a question in terms of as you might have heard, enrollment is down from projections, so she wanted to get a sense of what's that impact for us in terms of revenue, and literally as it does each year, only this year is kind of magnified. Enrollment is something that changes on a daily basis, so what's really important is to just sort of have a rule of thumb to just sort of know, as enrollment changes, what's the financial impact of that? Now, one thing to note is that there's the protection in the first 6 weeks, and that there's a hold harmless deal. So even if our attendance is way down, we still get we get a set number. So during the first 6 weeks, even if our enrollment is down, we're okay. We'd be real close to our budgeted revenue number in the first 6 weeks. But beyond that, that's when if the kids aren't there, then we start losing funding for it. So the rule of thumb is literally for every 1,000 kids, that's worth $5.5 million worth of funding. So if we're down 1,000, that's $5.5 million. If that stayed down the whole year, that's $5.5 million worth of impact. 2,000 is 11 million. That's the rule of thumb. So just to kind of give perspective on that, as you know, back in June, the board adopted roughly a $10 million budget shortfall. Last month, we adopted a $4 million budget amendment. So our budgeted shortfall is like $14 million, and so any revenue, less than budget would just add to that budgeted deficit. So just wanted to give you that in terms of perspective. And so if there are any questions, be happy to try to answer them.
So do we have a sense of our, because it's different than just enrollment, it's average daily attendance. So it's not just, okay, we get our weekly enrollment reports. We know we're down how many thousand kids right now, Dr. Flores?
Yeah, it's 3,190 as of the 15th of
so
September.
So roughly 3,200, right, give or take. But has our attendance, what is our ADA looking at like?
From a rearview mirror, the kind of rule of thumb is basically about 95%. So that's perspective in terms of
is that what we've been seeing?
And I don't get like daily attendance. I get enrollment piece. I typically get attendance information is at a 6 weeks period. Every 6 weeks, I get what that attendance is. So right now, it really, from a financial, it's quote a non-issue because right, we're going to get the same funding either way. But that's just kind of historical context is around 95%.
Okay, so roughly at 3,200 students, if we don't see a change there, right, then that would be roughly like $16-17 million.
Right.
Okay, which would be added to our current budgetary shortfall, so it's about 30 to 31 million shortfall based on what our current. If we took a snapshot right now.
Correct.
Thank you.
Yep.
Mr. Math?
Yes, thank you. So last spring when we shut down, we did have a favorable budget impact. Is that right? I can't remember the exact amount.
We've got, we're working on closing the books for last year, and the June 30 numbers that Sarah just gave me, our Director of Finance gave me this week, for the year, we ended on the general fund roughly with, we had budgeted a $7.3 million budget shortfall, a bottom line. At the end of the year, we went from being short 7.3 to the good 5.5 million. So we beat our collective budget by $12.8 million.
Yeah, and I don't know how much of that was due to the COVID crisis versus other things, but my question is the fact that we didn't open the schools for 3 to 3.5 weeks, is there maybe a financial benefit that we accrued during that period?
Right, so when you kind of just cut to the chase, that $5.5 million, that's every variable that came into play, is embedded in that number. Now, for us, our truth from an operating standpoint is roughly 90% of our cost is people. And so we didn't let anybody go as a result of COVID. Everyone stayed on the payroll. So our biggest expense, that COVID didn't change that. Now some overtime went away and that sort of thing. But the lion's share of our cost structure didn't change. Now, when buildings aren't there, you're not using cleaning supplies. When buses aren't running, you're not burning fuel. So some of those operating costs are lower. So that's kind of the all-in.
So $1 million, $2 million?
Well, the piece is kind of like this. There's no way that I guess you could spend a whole lot of time trying to cause and effect. How much of this was COVID? How much of this was overall run rate? Our total for the year was we beat everything by $12.8 million. We beat our budget by $12.8 million last year.
I have a question about that. So when we approved the transfer of $15 million over to the capital project fund, I don't know, I kind of thought that was from the surplus from last year, but you're saying no, that $9.5 million of that actually came from fund balance.
Right, and the thing, hey, our truth is until you close the books, you don't truly know in the year how you're going to do. And with transfers, it's still our money. So it's just literally like, okay, I held all my money in this hand before, then I took some of it and I put it in this hand. It's still the district's money. If tonight you said, hey, I want to move some of that back to this hand, it's still our money. We can do what we want with that. Our things that we've talked about at cabinet and that ultimately we'll talk about at the board level as well, is what we're going to have to do is be obviously very cost conscious with, okay, revenue's down, the numbers we just talked about, okay, that wakes you up, it doesn't take your eye off of that when we know what we're looking at. So then it becomes a situation of, okay, we have money in capital projects, we've got money in bond, but that's going to have to last us a long time because, with everything, we haven't, as a board, anything we haven't talked about, well, hey, our next bond is going to be, we haven't even talked about when that's going to be, so the roof's still going to have to get done, all that kind of ongoing work is still going to have to happen, it's going to have to get paid for, so we're just going to have to make real hard, is it a need or is it a want, how bad do we need it, and have real hard looks in terms of before we pull the trigger and spend the money, okay, we really needed that before we commit to it.
That's actually a really good clarification for you to make, because I think that there's even some things we're going to be talking about tonight. It's important to understand the fiscal situation and the unknowns and the stressors that we have because of this crisis. And like you said, it's just a time where we have needs and we have wants, and it's just a need time, and that is just the reality that we're in.
Right.
Mr. Chadwell.
Yeah, thank you. I've got kind of two main questions, and they're a little bit different. But the first one is, I think it was mentioned. I think Sharon mentioned it, and then I think was brought on board about the staffers, but I'm going to ask here in general about like bus drivers. So I can imagine some bus routes have they don't need a bus route if you have 30% on average, so are the bus drivers, are they going to campuses and are they available to help with cleaning, or are they, I can't imagine that they're doing certified teaching, but can they do cleaning and the custodian work?
I can address that. What we did was since we're not running all of our routes to full extent right now
that's what I was talking about, right? Okay.
So what we did is we took the transportation employees and sent 2 to each of our 5 high schools just for support. They're not teaching classes, obviously. They're not certified teachers, but to help supervise and monitor. I mentioned that earlier in the presentation that every campus got 1 and our 5 big high schools got 2 each. And so those folks have shown up and done a great job from anything the principal, basically this principal, what do you need me to help with?
But just at the high schools?
No, 2 at each high school, 1 at every other campus.
Oh, okay. And they're available to help with anything other than teaching. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. You did mention that, and I just wasn't sure how many there were, so thank you. And then the other question I had was kind of related to, so if there's 3,200 students, now when is the snapshot, when do they take the snapshot for? And I guess this kind of goes, maybe it's all changed for this year, but is it mid-October for your enrollment roughly?
Mandy, can you answer that?
It's at the end of October.
End of October. Okay. Yes. So assuming there's a 3,200 student decline in enrollment, which would be roughly 6.4% if we have 50,000 students, so there'd be 6.5% maybe roughly. Will there be any point where you don't, maybe the number of teachers you need, and again, this kind of goes back to how many teachers are in a classroom and they're teaching. I know there's some. But could it ever be to the point where you don't need as many teachers because you're down by 6.5% or whatever students? And could you release them from their contracts? Because there's been some articles in the paper recently about teachers wanting to get out now that they're gone and they don't want to be penalized. So that may be an HR question. That may be,
Yeah, I think their contract, their contract assures them, but as far as other staff and things like that, You did say, and I think 6.4% decline in enrollment is a significant hit, and it's a sudden hit. And so non-contracted employees and other things, and we're not there yet, and we're not having those discussions, but it's obvious that, as you point out, 6.4 is significant, and we can't avoid those discussions. We're having some internal, dialogue to say, if this doesn't, how do we get our students back? When will we get our students back? And things like that. But Annette might want to speak to contracted employees.
So while she's walking up here, I'll just say that like I said, there's been a couple articles. There was one in today's paper. Again, it was talking about local teachers, and I think it was Austin, maybe Pflugerville, and they were saying some of these teachers have decided they don't want to teach, for health reasons or whatever. But they're reluctant to get out of it. They don't want to quit because it would hurt their contract. So is that a TRS issue? Is it an individual district?
Sure, it's an individual decision really for them. Right now, we're not holding anybody from or reporting anybody. And actually, this year, they're not doing anything about contracts, so you can't report it to SBEC. But what we are asking sometimes is, can you hold on for a couple of weeks, let us find a replacement before you take off.
Okay.
But we have not.
So normally, though, in a normal year, if a teacher left in the middle of the year while they're under contract, you would report that to SBEC.
I've never had to report anyone to SBEC for that.
But you could,
can.
Because they broke their contract, just like the other.
But we work with our employees, so we always make sure that if they can give us a couple of weeks to find a replacement, or even longer. Sometimes it takes a little bit longer, but people are very willing to work that through.
Okay, thank you.
Can I actually just follow up real quick? Because I was actually thrilled to see in the Statesman article today that Round Rock was not mentioned. So thank you. That was very exciting. And one of the things that article was kind of talking about was staff requests. And so I guess I'm just kind of curious to follow up on that. Can staff still apply? Because I know we've had a few cases now, and there may be people that have changed now that it's closer to them. They're a little more nervous. Is that still open for staff to do that?
Sure. We haven't closed it because obviously people's circumstances change as time goes on. So we won't close the idea of an alternative work arrangement or ADA arrangements due to COVID. What is important to always remember that it's always based on the student need. So if we have to have someone back to campus due to what they teach or what their position is, then we may have to have them come back to campus or not be able to approve the request.
And can you just remind me real quick?
Sure.
And I see you, Ms. Feller. Just when staff do go on quarantine, like if we've put them on quarantine, and I know we've had to do that, is it their own vacation time, their sick time that they're using, or is that's part of the?
There's a 10-day.
The 10-day, okay.
That they actually get. So you're
okay. I thought so, but thank you, Ms. Feller.
And I didn't submit this question ahead of time, so if you don't have the answer or even an idea about it, you can put it in the board update. But do you have any information about how our enrollment might be faring with other districts in the Austin area? If we're about the same percentages, whatnot?
What I know, the one kind of data point, I kind of have one definite one and then anecdotal. So one, in talking with the CFO at Leander, referenced ours, hey, we're down. Her statement, she said, hey, we're ballpark down about 5% as well. I know that in talking with Dr. Flores, and he's connected to, has conversations with surrounding superintendents. Nobody I've talked to that, when I've said, hey, we're down, nobody has been like, well, that's a surprise, because the mentality, like what you're hearing, is us too, us too, us too.
Yeah, that's fairly consistent throughout not only the region but the state as well. So 6.4 for us is definitely, for a district that's always been growing. It's definitely something that's a shock to us. But Leander's the same way. Talking to Bruce and talking to Doug in Pflugerville and Fred in Georgetown, same thing. And same with Austin right now, as they transition to virtual and then eventually come back, they're seeing that as well.
We actually had a conversation last night about this, and the sentiment was that, like, and there was an article today. I think Austin was like 5,500, which out of 80,000 is less. And then in the meeting last night, there was, it seems like the outlying districts, they are faring better. They're flat, or they've seen, minimal decrease, or maybe even a slight increase. But the closer you get to the urban center, the more consistently everybody's down. But the rural, more outlying areas are a different matter.
That's right, but I also, that's why I didn't mention some of the smaller districts in the region. You look at Spicewood Elementary, and they're bigger than some of those districts, right? And so, but the ruralness has helped them as well. So that's a good point.
Mr. Math?
Yes, so we've done a lot of great planning as to, what happens if this, if that. But now that we're on the field and it's game time, could you please remind me of the policies and procedures in place once we get a positive test from a student? So hypothetically, if there's 2 teachers and 20 students that were in close contact with those, with that infected student, what happens?
Yeah, I'd probably ask Sharon to answer that. Our COVID coordinator,
Yeah.
I think she just put some of that information out.
Sure. So if we have a positive case, we do what's called a case review. And so the nurse or the COVID contact will complete a case review. And part of that case review includes listing all the close contacts that child has been with. Again, the close contact is defined as having been within 6 feet for more than about 15 minutes, or if you have secretious like spit or anything like that has come along with it as well. So then what happens is from the case review, we look at the close contacts and we notify the close contacts first, because we want to make sure that they're notified of what they have to do. And a close contact is going to have to be quarantined for 14 days because they are symptomatic. And then the student themselves, they are not yet symptomatic, but the student who is symptomatic, who has some kind of symptom, they're isolated for 10 days. Now, if they go to a doctor and they determine from the doctor that it's something other than COVID, and the doctor signs off that it's something else, another diagnosis, then they return back. But again, if it's a positive case, if we're talking a positive case, then that child is out for 10 days and cannot return to the school until they are not symptomatic, they are fever-free for 24 hours without fever-reducing medication, and that they have been out the entire 10 days. And again, who gets notified? The entire campus. So the staff gets notified as well as the community. So you get through our e-news, our Blackboard e-news that parents have signed up, it gets pushed out a district letter to everybody notifying them that there is a positive case. And then it will also go up on the COVID dashboard that Friday.
So if I heard that right,
clarification really quick. When Sharon was talking about quarantining, if someone has a close contact and they are sent home for quarantine for 14 days, there's not anything that can buy that person out of quarantine, whether it's a staff or a student. So if you go to the doctor and receive the letter, or if you go to receive a negative COVID test, that's simply a period in time. It's a moment in time test that says you don't have COVID. It doesn't get you out of that 14 days. You have that whole entire time that you have to stay out, because that's the period of which you could come up with symptoms. So just to clarify that if someone is sent home to quarantine, there's not a way you can come back. If you are sent home with symptoms, we've talked about the random list of very vague symptoms that the school nurses are tasked with sending kids home for. The way that you can come home from an isolation period of 10 days related to one of those symptoms is what Sharon was talking about. So you could go and get a letter from the doctor that says it's an alternative diagnosis that says you are no longer infectious, or a negative COVID test.
Okay, so a couple of follow-up questions. So I assume all those are calendar days and not school days? Okay,
Right.
and if I heard that right, the person, the child that actually has COVID and is tested positive can be back on the campus sooner than someone that maybe sat next to him or her in class?
Yes, let me explain why that is. So the way that it works is that once you become symptomatic, typically it's about 10 days from when you actually get your symptoms that the infectious period lasts. And so the person who was with them or near them hasn't gotten symptoms yet. They're not yet there. It's going to take about 3 more days for them to show those symptoms, and then you've got the 10 days from there. That's why we go with a 14-day period. And we're not the ones who decide that. That's the local health authorities who decide what those number of days are. And so the 10 days, it's kind of, it seems like it's backwards. Like if you're confirmed, it should be longer, but it's not. It's that you are symptomatic already. So you have a shorter period of time to be infectious. However, the close contact has not had a chance to get their symptoms. And we're finding that sometimes the person who was, and again, not in our district, but from cases we've heard of, we have heard of other cases where it's taking almost that whole time period, like 11 days before they actually start showing symptoms. And then they have to stay out another 10 days from that. So it's once you get those symptoms is where that 10 days comes in.
Thank you. I thought that explanation was very helpful, not only to myself, but anyone listening. So thank you so much.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you for the question.
Actually, as Mason, I saw Mason's hand earlier. So, yes, Mr. Moses, if you want to take yourself off mute. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you, Madam President, and thank you, everybody, for the presentation this evening. We appreciate all the work y'all are doing and have been doing for the last several months to get us ready to come back to school. And I shared on Monday a picture with Dr. Flores of my first grader who was celebrating after his last Zoom call. So he was very excited to be back on campus this week and seeing his friends, and then at least start getting back to some semblance of normal. And I just have 2 questions. And one is, as we come back and as we start to monitor numbers as students are on campus and as we get things reported, what are some benchmarks we can look for, that parents can look for, that may say, hey, now it's time that we may be able to start loosening up some of the current parameters on campus, specifically letting middle school and high school kids move around, doing more on elementary schools. I think we all need to be patient, understand that's not going to happen this week, it's not going to happen next week. But hopefully, as this continues, as Mr. Math, I'm kind of go off what you said and borrow a sports phrase and call an audible and allow us to start actually seeing some more flexibility on those campuses.
I think I can answer that. So,
an excellent question, too. And Brandy probably has a lot of good information as well. I wanted to share that there's a lot of things that we're thinking about. So part of it is knowing that this is an unusual time because we've also started when Labor Day just finished, right? So part of what we listen to when we're meeting with the local health authorities every week is they're worried about a spike and the timing of the spike. So it's typically, like I said, it's a 14-day period from when you get infected that you typically show these symptoms or become lab confirmed. And so we're talking about a 2-week period in which we are very closely monitoring how our students are doing. So how many cases, how many positive cases, how many cases of symptomatic students we have, and we're comparing it with other districts, our neighboring districts. So we're looking, and we're always talking to Leander, Georgetown, and who else is it? Pflugerville, Brandy? That we do? And those are where we kind of take a look and say, hey, how are we doing in comparison? So there will be some standard metrics in terms of some of those, and I'll let Brandy kind of refer to those. But the benchmark itself really is one of those things that we are monitoring our students to make sure that we don't have as many positive cases. We get told a lot that, how we're pretty tight on our guidelines, and we are, you're right. We started that way, but there is that opportunity to relax those guidelines. I can't say a very specific number, like if it's this number, it goes this way, or this number, it goes that way, because it's a comparison too between what we're seeing happening around the state as well. Brandy, do you have more?
I was just going to say that, you know, TEA and the CDC and either of our counties haven't given us anything, Mr. Moses, that tells us specifically that when we can loosen those things up. So it's kind of like writing our own playbook. So we are just trying to be smart about that. And we want to be able to offer something in that direction though, because we want to offer some hope to the families who don't want to have their kiddos sitting in the same desk all day long. That's not what we want to have either, but we're trying to keep it safe for our employees and safe for our staff while we open this up at the beginning. We are looking for that 2 to 14 days after these spike periods that we were talking about. So it's near the end of October where we think we can be able to look at some of these things and make some changes. It just doesn't seem like, this is our third day, so it doesn't seem like it's time. And a lot of people have asked that question. It's a great question. And a lot of people said just what you said, that you don't expect it to be right away. I think people just want hope. And we want that too. So we're just going to be, it's a playbook I think we're going to write, and we've already started the discussions over it. But it's certainly not set in stone yet. It's something that we'd like to do safely though.
Yeah, let me just add.
I think that's an important point, because I go back to, the first bullet point when you say we're going back to school is to be open and stay open.
Yes.
Yeah. I always feel like the only thing worse than not going back is going back and then stopping shortly thereafter.
And we're seeing that.
And we are seeing.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
We're seeing that happen around the state, and it's not to say, we've already had positive cases of student and staff. Our dashboard goes live tomorrow, and so far I can tell you what I'll be putting on that dashboard is we have 3 staff and 1 student so far in our district. I don't know what's going to happen tonight and before tomorrow when I report it, but we have had positive cases. It's not an if, it's a when. When we have all these kids together in these situations, that we will have cases. So we are just trying to, these mitigation strategies that we've put into place is really trying to keep the quarantines at a minimum. We don't want to take out a whole huge team. We don't want to take out, huge pods of kids. We'd like to keep it as isolated as possible because we don't want to send kids home and we don't want to have to close down buildings. But if we do need to do that, we've been working in conjunction with our health authorities to make those decisions, and they've been very positive and very open to discussing these things with us. So we're just going to move forward and try to be positive about it, and whatever we have to do to keep the kiddos safe, then that's what we're going to do.
And if I could also mention that if you start out with clear expectations and clear guidelines, it's kind of like the beginning of the year for a teacher. We start out really strong with strict guidelines and strict rules, and then you kind of can relax a little bit along the way. And I hope that is the case. That is our hope as much as I'm sure it is everybody else's. So just know that we want to keep our kids safe. That's our number one. That's where all our decisions come from, is our heart and our place of keeping kids safe.
And staff.
Of course.
Yeah. Sharon, there when you said about strict guidelines at first and then loosen up over time, I think that sounds a lot like people's households during COVID. It was really strict those first few weeks whenever kids are home, and then all of a sudden, at least for my house, it was like, all right, let's just whatever, just eat something and please just do what you need to do. And then, Sharon, just one question for you or Dr. Flores, whoever's appropriate, is I know we want to make sure, of course, we're giving our campuses flexibility to meet the unique needs of their populations. But I also know that can also inadvertently breed confusion, or it creates inconsistencies throughout the district that when parents are talking on the phone or they're at the kids' activities on the weekend, it's, your campus is allowing specials. Oh, my child's campus isn't. Can you kind of talk through that? And also, Dr. Flores, I'm going to put this question to you, is do we need to look at creating some consistency there across the district? That way, we make sure, not just from an equity standpoint, but just so kids are getting the same experience when they're at campus, when they're on campuses.
Yeah, the first thing I'd say is that we pride ourselves on trying to have the consistency that you're asking for. But again, as was noted, this is just the third day. So you might have some allowances that have been made or some progress that has been made that hasn't been shared, or it was actually a little premature. So we will continue to obviously monitor that and have what we hope are some specific guidelines or the expectations that campuses follow. It's not right now a case where each campus has the autonomy to determine what they have. So Dr. Presley and the area soups work on that every single day. So where there might be some inconsistency, it might be seemingly inconsistent, but it's only that it's the third day and it's the first time that the campus has broached that topic or moved in a direction that maybe they were moving a little faster than their peers, and then eventually we'll monitor that as well. So we're trying to be as consistent as possible. But I wanted to go back to your first question, because what I think, and the speakers earlier spoke to kind of a return back to normal because of the restrictive state of where we are in day 3, actually day 1, day 2, and day 3 in our middle schools. But there is a return to normal that is very clear metric that would be able to say we could go back to the March 13th and pre-March 13th environment that we all love and cherish. And that would be in Williamson County, and Brandy speaks to this, we go into a color phase. Well, we were red 2 weeks ago, and now we're at yellow, which allows us to have a hybrid model or students on campus. And we're at stage 2 or stage 3 actually in Travis County. So back to your point, if we ever, and when we go, I should say when we go from yellow to green in Williamson County and from 3 to 1 in Travis County, then you have what would be then obviously something that allows us to that normalcy that everybody seeks, even our teacher who spoke to the concerns he had. But we're I want to make sure everybody understands that with the current science and the current data, we are a long way from green and stage 1 Travis counties. But when we do, and when that happens, you can rest assured we'll be moving on that. And the last thing I'll talk about flexibility, just know again, and I keep saying this over and over because I want everybody to understand, it's just the third day, so be patient. Dr. Presley, I and Ms. Estes were meeting with the area superintendents today because they know they're having direct contact with the principals at the middle school and the high schools, and we've walked some of the schools as well to see what difference and what the variance is. But the bottom line to that, they understand that we will provide more flexibility, but it's just not time yet. It's just not time. So all we're asking for is more patience and more grace in something that is happening around the state where some have moved faster. Again, and I think Ms. Vessa points out a word earlier on finance, rural. Obviously, it's more isolated and it's less opportunity to occur. So you see them playing football, cheering, doing all the things that they do. We're trying to do that, but we're trying to do it as guarded as we possibly can, because I'm telling you, things can shift and change overnight. Dr. Presley at the last meeting mentioned a school district he visited, not to say that that's what we're going to do, but to say, how will a district that's going to allow comparative high school numbers like ours, 65% come in? Well, one of their high schools overnight had to go from on-campus instruction to overnight shutting down because of some outbreak there. And it wasn't so much the outbreak, but as was mentioned, the contact and the tracing and all the things that happened put staff in a perilous situation as far as numbers and meeting the needs of their students. So they went quarantining beginning this Monday for 2 weeks. We've had a district the same way in East Texas. I mean, these are things that I want everybody to understand. We're not saying we want to keep this to be restrictive. We want to restrict your child. We're trying to say, let's get back to, and I think you said it, when we start, we want to be able to stay open instead of starting and stopping. So give us an opportunity to be able to look at that. We hear you. We hear everybody who wants to go fast. And some people say that's not fast enough. But even that, we just need a little bit of time, and we'll go forward. And I hear a bell, so I think that tells me to stop talking. So thanks for the question.
Actually, Corey, sorry, Mr. Chadwell.
All right, thank you.
And then Corey, you'll be next.
So I know where everybody's looking and reading the stories. I think we mentioned this last week, that everybody's seeing the headlines. Every day it's almost changes. And I think the latest headline today was there may not be a vaccine until middle of next year. So with that, I'm confident that between all the health care providers and the county, everybody's looking at this. And I know there's going to be some glitches. What I am concerned about, though, is are there any students that are failing? That young girl, young lady, young woman who she said, who spoke earlier, I hope there aren't any students who are actively involved or not failing at this early age. I mean, I'm assuming that there are some glitches in the Zoom, but if they're working, if they're showing up and they're participating, I want everybody to feel encouraged wherever they are. If they're at home learning from Zoom, or if they come into campus, that they are glad to be there and they're making the best of it as they can. So that was one of my statement. And then, and I know there'll be more details about this later on. I don't need an answer tonight, but the cases, the testing, the COVID testing, the district is not providing any testing right now. Is that correct? There's no testing of any kind. It's all has to be done by families, individual primary care, if they're drive-through or whatever in their neighborhood. So. And I know it's been said before, everybody said, well, there's a lot of false positives, there's a lot of false. So, again, I'm going to leave that all to the experts. I know there's a lot, and whether you believe the numbers and there's a lot of great, and I'm confident that everybody's doing the best they can on that, even though there are some uncertainties in it. So those are the two things I wanted to bring up. So thank you.
Ms. Vessa.
So I feel like I'm going to be kind of jumping all over the place because my questions aren't grouped. But maybe I'll start back with what we were talking about. And I think one of the things that I noticed in just the commentary was just this sense of can we explore ways for just kids to have the opportunity to talk to each other at some point in the class, or just more interaction, because I know that right now, the way it's set up, we have to have it be quiet so that the teachers can do their work. And so I think there's a question there is like, okay, maybe we can't loosen up things in terms of movement, but can we make the conditions within our pods more collaborative in terms of just even being able to turn around your chair and talk to a fellow student or teacher?
I think all of our principals are working on that as we speak. I mean, I've seen some of that already where they're finding creative ways. And if there's ever a time for creativity and innovation, it's now on our campuses. And I've seen that some principals are starting to do that. They're sharing ideas. So the answer to your question is yes, because as long as the primary purpose of having kids in pods is so that if there is a positive case, the contact is limited. So instead of shutting down an entire school with kids who meandered the school or were going through passing periods, it's confined to we know it was limited contact that anybody has on the campus. And I think that'll serve us well in these very early days. And once again, it's day 3. But we already have principals that are getting very creative in helping kids to interact more, to go outside when they can, take their pod outside, doing things like that. And I think we'll see more and more of that.
So another question that I had in this same sphere of more movement is I know that we're looking at our neighboring districts and talking to them, but really in truth, they haven't been back long enough to give us a really good sense of what the ramifications are. But there are other districts that I've been following around the state that have been back to a more normal secondary school environment since the end of August. And I guess my question is, we talked about using some metrics that Williamson County put together, which I believe is an incidence rate of under 1 and a positivity under 5. And then I'm trying to think, is stage 1 the hospital? I know stage 2 is 1 to 10. for Austin Public Health. So I guess stage 1 would be under 1 new admission per day to the hospital. So, I mean, those are ambitious goals. But are we also just looking at, okay, what are some of these other districts that may have more longevity? What's the outcomes? Now, we already had that one, which we're not naming, but I know who that is, and I know how long they've been in and what their situation is. There's some in Houston, though, that I've been watching. What's your sense of tracking these other districts, seeing what they're doing, and how will that play into our decisions long term, rather than, because I like to say, the metrics are best guesses. You're saying, okay, we think if we have an incidence rate under this, we can do that. But the truth of the matter is, these are all experiments. And so we actually have real live data going on around us. And how much are we looking at that too?
Well, I guess to answer your question, you said it best. These are all experiments. And when we share information with our other districts, not just neighboring districts, but districts around the state and even the nation, best practices is what we're all looking at. So we could look at a school in Houston who is, and I'm just making that up, that has kids going to class and moving through the halls, and they haven't had any cases. But overnight, they can, because everybody's early in the game, overnight they have some positive cases, they quarantine, and ultimately could have to shut down the entire school. So I think you said, I liked what you said, that these are all experiments right now, and they truly are. And we're trying to be as cautious as we can early in the game to see what works and doesn't work. As Dr. Flores said earlier, if somebody has a perfect solution, they need to share it with the world, because nobody has a perfect solution to this. So I don't know if that answers your question, but we do regularly share information. And believe it or not, a lot of districts are copying what we're doing in certain realms because they think we're doing a really good job with it. So I don't know if that answers your question directly, but that's...
Well, let me just add that that's a great answer, and I just want to expand on the fact that even in our neighboring districts, when you hear, that schools are doing what we want to do, and that's open to where students can move from class to class, one of the neighboring districts is only at freshmen only, and 50% of their freshmen, it's just a time, and they're waiting and seeing as well. But the persona would be, that district has opened and they're able to move about. They are, but only freshmen are on campus right now. The other district, another neighboring district, less than 25%. So they're very small. But back to your point, we are definitely, I'm in contact, I would love to say almost on a daily basis, but with superintendents from the Houston area or Dallas-Fort Worth area. And we try hard to say what are some of the best practices. Now, I will say districts like Stephenville that are 5A district, but they're more isolated. They don't have a metropolis unless you get to Fort Worth, another 60 miles. So from there, I mean, they benefit, and districts like that do benefit. So you're going to see a lot of the Friday night lights and students moving from class to class. But when you get closer to the metropolitan area, you're going to have those rates of instances that are going to be heightened. So again, yes, we are definitely looking at that, and it's not just going to take an almost perfect scenario. But here's what I want everybody to understand. As superintendent, one child, one teacher fatally comes to a point where something, I've lived through snow days that we got wrong. We don't want to get this wrong. So right now, again, day 3, and I've said that 15 times already, but again, it's not that we don't want to move where you want to go, where everyone wants to go. In fact, I mean, at some point, I'd like to hear what the board would like for us to do, because I think we're going at it at a point where instead of starting and stopping, we want to go the distance as best that we can. But if the board would like, it might be helpful if the board is saying, look, metrics don't mean that much, or and I'm paraphrasing really badly. But anyway, or any input, and we will use that input, and that can be definitely the will of the board. But we feel that now with the area superintendents and different things that they're doing, they went back and they're going back every day with their high school principals, their middle school principals. And I actually was encouraged because what I'm hearing and what I saw even at one campus, I thought, yeah, it's pretty, I'm not going to say sad, it's just not what we're used to. It was really impactful. But in talking to area superintendents this morning at 9:30, I can tell you they're on it, their principals are on it, and I think we're going to see some movement even very shortly. But to the degree of movement that they're going to compromise the safety of students and staff, we're not even close, and I don't want them there yet. I'll take that one and say, I don't want you going that way yet. So, but I mean, if the board wants to expand as well during the conversation, it would be helpful too.
I mean, for me, I feel like you're right. We're 3 days in, and so we're still in an observation mode. We're observing other districts. We're observing the ramifications of the Labor Day weekend. We're observing the ramifications of the University of Texas and other universities being back. You know, I don't know that I would be in favor of making a change immediately. I think that's premature. But I think things that we can do is, you know, try to improve the experience as much as possible within the safety parameters that we have. Like I was talking about, the kids can talk to each other or things like that. And so I think that there's good ideas that can come from our campus administration and our teachers and students in terms of like, okay, we have these parameters to ensure safety. What can we do to make this a more enjoyable experience for you within these parameters? And I think that even just having that freedom to imagine something that could change, that is inspirational to kids, to staff, to know that they can be a part of a process of safely making accommodations to make the day more pleasant. Because I do know that, you know, it's, as we heard from speakers, I have heard from my neighbors and friends that it's, and, you know, some of us have children living that, it is not what we would ideally want, but maybe we can make, I totally understand the circumstances. And as one of the speakers said, we're living in a global pandemic. You may not want to be living in a global pandemic. It just is the reality of what the situation is. But anything that we can do within the parameters to make the day better, I think I would like to explore that.
Yeah, no doubt. And I'll just add that when I said we visited with area superintendents today, those discussions they were already having. Today, I'm just assured by listening to them, I thought, wow, they are moving that. So that is being done. So thanks.
Well, and it made me think of what Trustee Moses said, because it may depend on how many kids are on each campus, because some of the campuses are going to have a lot more.
That's the point I was going to make too, back to Mason's point. We have a baseline of expectation for distancing and all that, but if you go around the district, you'll see some pods of students. There might be 3 or 4 kids in a pod. Well, you can do a lot more things with 3 or 4 kids than you can if you've got 10 or 15 in a room. So, it's different for every campus. It's different for every pod, pretty much. And so we're trusting our principals. They're making decisions that are, first of all, safe, but secondly, as make it as pleasant as they can for the students while they're there during the start.
I couldn't tell, Mason, did you have your hand up to follow up on that? Okay. Sorry, Ms. Vessa.
Okay, so I'm going to be done with that discussion. I'll move on to something else. Okay, so back to the dashboard. Really excited about the dashboard. I know many districts around the state are doing dashboards. I think it's very helpful for our community. Does the dashboard only include on-campus students and staff who test positive? If we have a student or staff member that's currently doing virtual teaching or learning, are they included in those numbers?
They would be included if they were reported to the campus.
No, that's, yeah.
It's only for on-campus learners, Trustee Vessa. That's consistent with all the other districts in the state are doing. And that includes student and staff that are on campus only or participating in extracurricular activities on campus. We will reflect those as well on our dashboard.
That was the point I was making. We have some students that are coming up for activities, but they're virtual students.
Mm-hmm.
So
yes.
Even though they're virtual learners,
right.
to your question, they would be reported, yeah.
Right. So now, so right now, both of my children are virtual learners, but they're coming onto campus for athletics, for band. And so every day that they come, they have to fill out a screener in rank 1. But I haven't had the experience of my student just coming onto campus. So is that same requirement for all students who are coming onto campus, or is it just students participating in extracurricular activities?
So the screening is done at home. We've sent out multiple times, multiple ways, the health screening that is the document. We do not have a system that is like that rank 1 that we are using for our kids. So we expect our parents to definitely check their kids, ensure that they are looking for those symptoms, and then not sending their students if they're sick. So it's one of those things that it's an extra thing for band and athletics because it also allows us to know when they're on campus. If they're virtual learners, it tells us too, they are on that campus and we must notify them if there is a positive case. It's another way for us to make sure that we're tracking and know where our kids are.
So just to be clear, our on-campus learners is kind of like an honor system, but if you're participating in an extracurricular activity, you fill out the form, you have to actually take your temperature and have a temperature reported and sign it and everything every time that you come to campus. And my experience, we're all at the beginning of this, but my experience with my 2 students is that they've been requiring that for the student to participate in the activity, that no student who hadn't filled out the form would be allowed to participate.
Yes, that's true. Another layer on this too is to think about the fact that when you're playing an instrument in band, you're also closer. We try to keep the 6 feet apart, so don't get me wrong there. And we're actually looking at, purchasing some things to protect our instruments so that we're not having infectious secretions. But that being said, it is a different situation when you're dealing with athletics or you're dealing with band, in which it is much closer than what we typically have in the classroom. And so it is super important that we are verifying the temperature and verifying that they have screened themselves each day.
I appreciate that. So I'm going to switch again. And so at the last meeting that we had this chart that said how many students had designated that they wanted to be on-campus learners, and then the percentage of then we had the percentage of capacity, 25% capacity with this number and whatnot. So it was a really nice chart to kind of give us a sense of the percentage of capacity each of our campuses is on. My understanding is that the numbers actually, the actuals may be different than the expected. So is there a way that we can get an update of that chart to show, obviously it's a point in time actuals, people's circumstances change, but to get a point in time actual to, okay, this was in theory what people had opted for, but this is the reality. Is that something that can be provided to the board?
Yeah, I'm sure we could do that. I think it'd be prudent to let you know if we were to exceed 50%, which is kind of our target right now, staying below 50% on a campus. So I don't know if you want us to do the work on 55 campuses to give you an update on percentages and versus capacity. We can definitely do that for you, but I think the concern would be if we had a campus that was way over that. The bigger concern, though, on the horizon is when the grading period changes in October, those percentages most likely are going to go up because as things change, if we continue downward trends in the occurrence of the virus, we're going to have to kind of recalibrate what we're looking at percentages and the capacity of our buildings, because we don't, as I said earlier, any student that wants to come back can come back now that we're open.
I think she was asking, if I'm correct, you're asking how many. So you had a list of all the campuses, and this one was 20%, and that was 25, and 30, 35. What you're saying, Corey, if I get you right, is there's a lot fewer students who are showing up, or they showed up, as it said, 1 day, 2 days, and then they've dropped out. So is that what you're asking?
Yeah, I mean, essentially, we're looking at how many students in actuality came to be on campus learners. I mean, we had the number of kids we projected,
and that had to do with the capacity of the building.
So I don't really want anything different in terms of that chart, other than, maybe a new column that says actual.
Yes, I agree. I think that'd be a good idea. So it has nothing to do with the actual building size. It's just the number who said they were going to show up. So Campus A, they're going to be 20% who told this.
Well, that's easy to get, but what I was understanding her to say, that matched up with how many the campus could hold, because Terry had that information at the last meeting. We can put that together for you. That's fine. But just keep in mind, our target is not to exceed 50%. We're watching those numbers. And if you want to know them, we definitely can put together the information and get it to you.
I thought it was considerably less at each campus that were showing up.
I don't have any interest of, if we want to get number of enrollment, that's percentage of enrollment, that's fine. I mean, we can add that too. But I can calculate that because we get an enrollment report every week. I'm just more interested in, rather than a percentage of the enrollment. I loved how Terry did it before. He just said, this is 25% of this, the number that equates to 25% of this campus's capacity. This is 50%. So they don't have to change anything like that. It's just a new column that says actual.
Trustee Vesta, we are prepared to create that column in this chart. The request has been made of the registrar, who keeps track of those numbers. However, again, as we mentioned numerous times, we're into the third day, so we have to allow that time, at least attendance for several days, so that we can ascertain those numbers.
Gosh, we have a meeting next week, but we don't. Right now, we hadn't planned for it to be on the agenda, so.
Yeah, and keep in mind, too, another caveat to that is students can go virtual at any time, so those numbers will continue to change daily. So, and as Terry said, we're 3 days into the process right now. And as I said earlier, we have campuses that have kids that are showing up who want to be virtual, and their circumstances change. They want to come back to school. So all that's happening, and it changes on a daily basis on every campus.
Well, and that would be why I say it's just a point in time. Like, it's not, I understand it's going to change, but you just say, okay, we're going to pick this day, and that's the point in time.
Ms. Feller, go ahead.
I was just going to say that perhaps we could close this discussion and move on to our GMP discussion. That I think most of us submitted any questions that we had at the beginning of the week, and if anything else has come up since then, to submit those to administration. They could include it in a future board update. We've been going on this topic for
thankfully I've actually gone through all my questions, so I was good. But
Mr. Moses, did you have a question?
No, I was going to say I agree with Ms. Feller. I think we will just try to kind of move on to the next topic. I do want to reiterate something, though, to the community. I know Corey's touched on this, Dr. Flores has said it, and Brandy talked about it. I think all of us at some point, and that all the times we've talked about this topic have said it, is that all the parents know that all of us know that none of this is ideal. We know that we're still working on the virtual, we're still working on the in-person. We want your kids, we want our kids, we want our students all back on campus as soon as possible. And I think you've heard that from many of the trustees throughout the meeting. So I just want to reiterate there again that we're working on this. We know staff and Dr. Flores are working on this and have been for countless hours since last spring. So we just ask that you continue to work on this. We're going to make it better. It's going to get better each day. But just know again that we know the seriousness of all this, and we're continuing to try and make everything we're doing as best for our kids as possible.
And if I could just add one little thing, I just have to take a big shout out to all the teachers who are making the they are making lemonade out of this lemony situation. And they're just, I know for my kids, I can hear their calls every day and the enthusiasm and the effort that all the teachers are putting in to make this the best experience possible given the circumstances. I so appreciate it. And I will say that in terms of the elementary level in-person learning, I have heard so many great things, and just from families who were skeptical with all of the different precautions for their kindergartners. I mean, they were really skeptical that how their kindergartners would adjust to having to wear a mask all day and stay social distance. And yet they say their kids are coming home and they're just so glad to be at school. They're having such a wonderful time. The teachers are doing amazing. And so I just want to just a big shout out to all our teachers and staff for really doing the very best they can in challenging circumstances. And I know I speak for so many parents.
We all ditto. Next topic.
Yeah. Thanks. So do we want to take a really quick break before we start the next superintendent's report? So it is 7:54. Why don't we take a break till 8:05, 8:10? 8:10. But it's 8:06. We will go ahead and call back to order. And Dr. Flores, we are still on superintendent's report, item H2.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much, President Weir. We do have Goal Progress Measure 5.3 industry certifications. We have Dr. Kathy Malerba, and she's assisted tonight by Sherry Bonds. And I look forward to this presentation. So without further ado, Dr. Malerba and Sherry Bonds.
Thank you very much. I think it's probably more accurate to say that I'm assisting Sherry for a couple of slides. So good evening, President Weir and trustees. Glad to be back after crisis monitoring priorities from May to August. We're now resuming the adopted board monitoring calendar. And tonight is also the first time that Lone Star governance monitoring will really let us start to consider the impact that the COVID-19 school closures had on student outcomes. Next slide. Oh, I don't even know if the slides are up. I'm sorry. I just dove right in. That's it. Okay, I'm ready for the next one, Jennifer. So we'll be starting off the school year here by looking at Board Goal 5. The long-term goal is regarding college and career readiness of our graduating classes. And the goal progress measure that we're looking at is the percentage of comprehensive high school students who earn industry-based certification each year. And 2019 was our baseline year, where we started at 10%, and then the intention was to grow that to 12.5% by 2024. So just a couple of reminders. Every board of trustees is required to have some kind of college, career, and military readiness goal. It doesn't have to look exactly like this, but there has to be one. And then our goal progress measures are leading indicators of the long-term goal. So when we talk about industry certifications, we are, in this case, talking only about the ones that are considered in the state accountability system. So that's why we refer to them as industry-based, and you'll probably hear Sherry refer to them as IBCs. So don't be thrown off by that. And with that, I will hand it over to Sherry Bonds, Director of Career and Technical Education.
Thank you, Kathy, and thank you, President Weir and Dr. Flores and the entire board for having me in tonight. Last year, I was the guinea pig, the first person to go on a goal progress measure, and y'all setting those. And so it's exciting to come back and see what's taken place in 1 year. If we can have the next slide, please. What I want to do first is just start with that picture of who our CTE students are. We always like to remind you that they are all of our kids. The first number you see up there is 80%, and that's the current number of our high school students that are enrolled in a CTE course. And so it's not a kid down the street or in another neighborhood, it's all of our kids. So that's looking at our comprehensive high schools, and it's a lot of students. And these students are students that are in CTE pathways that they know that this is a career field that they're interested in. Others are trying to learn something new and to stay engaged with their friends. And then we also have some students that are taking some courses that are just a one-time, maybe like anatomy and physiology or forensic science or something like that. The bottom number is also a really exciting one for us always to report, that 94% of our current high school students have taken at least one CTE class. So again, it's everyone. We service all of our students that are interested in taking our courses. They're open enrollment. And so we're excited to have all of our kiddos in, and we hope they stick with us for more than one course, but if not, we are completely fine with that, because we are all about student choice and student interest and helping our students find their passion and career aspirations maybe. So on the next slide, you will see a list of 29 courses. Those are not our only courses that we offer within CTE. We have nearly 100 CTE courses from middle to high school that our students can enroll in. But these 29 courses here represent our IBC-related courses. So the courses on this list are directly linked with an IBC, because that's where we've mapped our TEKS to be related to the exam, and that our students, when they finish this course, they should be prepared to take a test. And it's important to say finished, because that's one of the metrics for what an IBC is, that it's not at the beginning of a sequence or a lower level course. Even some of these may be offered to a student as early as freshman year. The majority of these courses are offering really intense industry-based experience to our students. Software packages like Revit and Inventor and things that some of you are probably familiar with that you may or may not ever want to tackle. QuickBooks, like our accountants would use. So lots of really heavy-hitting softwares, but then also applicable experiences such as veterinary technology, EKG techs, pharmacy techs, certified nurse aid, so some hands-on courses. But these are only a portion of all of our courses that are offered. This list has 29. Last year, when I reported to you, the list was shorter. It was 22. So we actually looked at our courses with our teachers and mapped out if there were any more certifications that we could offer to our students, and we increased that list, working toward increasing our percentage of students earning an IBC. And the important thing to note, these 29 courses are mapped to 34 different certifications, so there's quite an opportunity for our students. So we were on a path of, or an upward trajectory with everything, and if we can have the next slide. I told you we increased certification offerings and increased the list of courses available, and then COVID hit. So it's important to know that we firmly believe we were on track to hit our 10.5%. We met with all of our campuses early in the fall after this meeting. We mapped out with them how they could make gains in either adding new certifications for students in different areas or offering training for teachers in order to help them excel and beef up their instruction to help their students. So we were right on track. And we can go ahead and go to the next slide. But you'll see we're at 3.7%, just in case, sorry, if someone wasn't able to see that slide. This slide gives you the picture of a comparison from the first year when we set those metrics to go from 10% to 10.5%. So in the gray, you'll see the 18-19 data, and in the green, you'll see the 19-20 school data. So the first item on the chart is students completing an IBC course. So last year when we reported, that was that list of 22, and there were roughly 3,300 students that completed an IBC course. In 1920, when we expanded the list to 39 courses, did I say that right? Let me double check my math. Yes. To 29 courses, we upped to almost 3,900 students completing that IBC course. So you can see we had a significant jump in students in IBC-related courses. Attempted exams in the previous year was almost 2,600. This last year, we were at 927. The important thing to note is that in the 18-19 school year, we only had 274 attempts at an IBC before spring break. This last school year, we had 577 attempts at IBCs before we went on spring break. So we were already starting to hit our stride with our IBCs, and then everything virtually stopped. We went into crisis schooling, as we know. Life as we had traditionally lived it was different, and everyone was adjusting. So you will see that in the 18-19 school year, our past exams were almost 1,600. This last year were 639. Our individual students earning an IBC was 1,388, and then in 1920 it was 535. So 535 of our individual students, despite all of the odds, still earned an IBC. So in thinking about it, I know there will be questions of, well, what could we have done? What should we have anticipated? The majority of, or actually all of these certifications, because they're industry-based certifications, they're not anything that our teachers can proctor just simply on their own. It's not something that they come up with the paper test, they hand it out in class, the kids take it, and they get a test. These are proctored by different, they actually have to be proctored by third-party vendors. And so our students are going through vendors either in a computer lab on campus, but it must be proctored by a staff member in the building, and it has to be on that set of computer labs. Pre-COVID, the vendors were not set up for our students to test at home. They were able to switch that, though, and many of them by May and June were figuring that out. So we actually had students who tested all through the summer. We have some students that actually earned their industry-based certifications as recently as September 1st. And so we've had students who are persisting. There's just, it was a unique time, but it's not anything that we could have done to prepare for. Our teachers worked really hard to work with those students who wanted to test over the summer and to keep going, and we're so proud of those students and teachers. We do have a commitment to our students who wanted to test, who were unable to, that if they are interested, we just need to know about it. Many of these students, if they were underclassmen or even juniors, they should still be enrolled in their program of study. And if so, especially with our online software exams, they have access to those in their classrooms. And so we just need to let their teachers know. We'll do some sort of a study session. The teachers will organize that, make sure they're prepared. And we already have vouchers. We buy vouchers as class sets for many of these certifications. So we have them available and ready for our students. We also have some certifications that we actually purchased the vouchers pre-COVID, and they're good for 6 months to a year, depending on the certification. And so we have those on hold for those students. So if they're ready and the teachers are prepared to have the students test, we'll set that up. Some tests still weren't available to be proctored until late in August, like certified nurse aid. That they actually have to physically do skills with a patient and demonstrate that. And so we had to wait for those providers to get everything in order. And so our teachers are working with students to identify who wants to test and be able to do that. So we still are committed to the students. One thing that no matter if providers have been able to switch or not, but what we can do to help with our students to actually prepare is at the August board meeting, you approved approximately $300,000 for VM software, and Dr. Audix actually had it on his slide on the last presentation. And what that software has done, and we're rolling it out group by group, and we should be ready in the next week to have everyone online. But what it does is it allows our students from a Chromebook, a PC, anywhere, either on a district network or on their home network, to log in virtually to their desktop in the district and have all of the software packages that we have. So that's not something that was available in the spring. Our students a lot of them didn't have devices in their hands, or if they did, they might not have software on them. But now, regardless of the type of device or how powerful it is, our students do have access to that software. So we're very thankful for that. The teachers and students are excited. That has been a labor of love between Mr. Gabehart's department, our instructional technology specialists, and everyone else in between. But it's been great. We've been having some real success with that. So we're excited that that's going to help our students stay on track, whether they're learning at home or if they'll be an on-campus learner, but so we can get as many students back on the track for certification as possible. That is all I have prepared, because the next slide is the question slide. So if there are any, I would be happy to entertain them. But of course, if you want to get real technical, we'll call up Kathy.
Ms. Feller.
So I had one statement and one question. But my statement was that even though our number of past exams went down significantly, our percentage went up. And I thought that was really impressive if you look at that. We were at about 62% passing rate in the 18-19 school year, and we are at about 75% pass rate for this past school year. So I think that really is, I know it's hard to kind of find the rainbow because everything went off the track because of COVID.
Yes.
It's always because of COVID right now, but I still think that that's a real good success for you guys to really hang on to, and for us as a board to really notice that our passing rate went up significantly. So I appreciate that.
Yes, ma'am. Well, that's all on the teachers.
Yeah, exactly. And then I think there was in the 2018 bond some money to increase some CTE course offerings. Do you have a status update on that? I know I did not prepare you on that, but if you have a status on where those funds and when those courses will be added into the curriculum?
Absolutely. So in that bond, we targeted $3 million for drone aviation and cybersecurity at all 5 campuses, and then 1 manufacturing program across the district. So this year, we are excited that at all 5 of our high schools, drone aviation has begun. Cybersecurity has started at 4 of the 5, Westwood being the one that is held off for 1 year because they also started robotics, which is a first in the district, and that's a manufacturing course. So our bond funds are supporting all 3 of those courses. I do not have a dollar amount exactly on how much we have spent, but we've been training our drone teachers for drone aviation, and we'll be getting ready to buy the drones and all of the fun things that they can play with the students when we return to campus. Bless you. And then cybersecurity, again, has begun this year, and those students are taking either Principles of Information Technology or AP Computer Science Principles. And so we're just really excited to get those courses going.
Great. Thanks for the update.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Moses, I couldn't tell if you had your hand up earlier or not. No? Okay. I don't.
I didn't, but I was going to let this go. I'll go ahead and go since you called on me. Really, I just wanted to say that I appreciate the work you're doing and everything you've done for our students in CTE. Talking to people across the district, whether you're at chamber events or talking to parents at schools or just pre-COVID, but everyone knows we have a really great CTE program. I know, Sherry, a lot of that goes to you and the work that your team do we'll provide those services to kids, because we know that while many kids may want to go to college, it's not the end-all be-all, and it's also not what every kid wants to do these days. So getting kids multiple pathways, the careers, the opportunities to really go out and create their own industry someday through these programs is just exceptional. So thank you for the work you're doing.
Thank you.
I just had one quick question. There's all these different certifications, and I know you said there were some problems. Do all of them have the ability now to test our kids? Like when we get to the end of this year, have all of them come up with their COVID plan if we're still in this kind of mode that we're in right now?
So let me find my list of exams to double check. Some of the exams, our students actually, whether the certification entity was ready for them to test or not, they actually had to get enough hours to test. So there are some also nuances with that. In looking at this, if it's a computer-based exam, they have, minus maybe one, they have been able to figure it out. So our students can now proctor virtually. We don't know how long they'll leave that open. Right now, some of them are saying until December. I don't think it'll be their intent for students to have exams proctored at home, just for the security of the exam and making sure that they keep these at an industry level. I think eventually they'll go back to where they'll be proctored either at an independent site or on a campus with a supervisor or with an approved proctor. But for right now, almost all of these are able to test virtually at home.
That's good news. Thank you. Did anybody else have any questions? All right, I don't see any. Thank you so much for your presentation.
I appreciate you letting me present, but it really, all of this work is a testament to the hard work of our teachers and our students. And then I have the fortune of having an amazing staff of CTE specialists that support our teachers by content, an instructional technology specialist, and then our assistant director, Ms. Peggy Mitcha, who pulls together all of our data. So we're just excited to be able to bring it to you tonight, one small piece of our student success, and thanks for letting me present.
And thank you, and thank your staff too from us. That was
Absolutely.
great.
Thanks, guys.
All right, so our next item is a discussion item, BBD Legal, which is our election campaign ethics. I think Ms. McFeeters, and I know Trustee Feller was the one who'd asked for this. So I didn't know
Yes,
if there was...
absolutely. Good evening, President Weir, Dr. Flores, trustees. I will keep my presentation brief, but I know that you all wanted just a quick reminder of the rules related to electioneering. The board does have one policy related to campaign ethics and electioneering, and that's BBBD legal, which is, as you know, legal policies are restatements of the law. So both the Texas Education Code and the Texas Election Code do prohibit the use of district time or resources to advocate for or against any candidate or measure. And the Texas Ethics Commission, which is the state agency that oversees campaign ethics issues, which include political advertising or the use of funds, does interpret that prohibition broadly to include time, computers, equipment, email systems, copiers, fax machines, supplies, anything that's district owned or district controlled. So I think that it's important to know that what employees are not allowed to do is to use any sort of district time or district resource in order to advocate for or against any candidate, any measure that may appear on the ballot. The district did send a reminder about these rules in early August when our teachers and all of our staff returned, but we did want to provide just another public reminder of the rules as election season heats up, just so everyone is aware.
Thank you. Did you have any specific questions, Ms. Fowler?
No, I just thought that it was, I remember getting the email back in August, and I appreciated that. I think that it's relevant timing, and I just thought that this was another good time to actually spend, even if it's just very briefly, to remind people about what is and is not allowed. And we're not just talking about candidates for school board. So this is across every election that's going on. Our students and our staff have the right to come to school without feeling like they're being politically influenced one way or another. So I just thought it was a good time to really remind everybody as we're entering the heat of things as we come up to November 3rd this year. So I didn't have any changes I was recommending or anything like that. Obviously, just more of a chance for everybody to remember where we're at and where we're going.
And that's a great point, Trustee Feller. Absolutely, you are correct that the prohibition on the use of district resources is specific to any candidate and any measure that's on the ballot.
Mr. Math?
Yeah, so while the hood is open on this topic, I thought it might be good to talk about us as trustees and kind of what's in bounds versus maybe not in bounds. And I'll give an example. So I think as a trustee, if I put a lawn sign in my yard, that's okay. I think as a trustee, if I advocated from the dais, vote for candidate X, that's not okay. But there's a lot of kind of in between, especially with social media. So I just wanted to see if any other of the trustees had any opinion as to kind of where we should maybe draw the lines as to what's appropriate behavior versus not. Like, for instance, if I were advocating for a candidate through social media, is that okay?
So I think, Trustee Math, part of the answer is going to depend. It's very difficult to answer these hypothetical questions in a vacuum because they are very fact-specific. The board operating procedures do contain some prohibitions on the actions of trustees related to electioneering. They're, once again, very similar to the prohibitions in BBBD legal. A lot of the answer is going to depend on whether or not you are does your social media represent you as a trustee on the board? To what extent are you using district resources or time to do that? I think that the board can certainly have a discussion about how you all want to handle those things. But as a trustee, I think you need to be very aware of when you are advocating for or against any candidate or measure, that you are endeavoring to do so only in your personal capacity.
can I mean, I don't get on social media all that often, but I don't necessarily have a separate account for anything, and I haven't advocated for anybody, and I don't intend to. But so I guess I'm just trying to clarify, if someone only has one account, that they kind of meld both their personal and their board posts. Is that something we should stay away from? Is that if you wanted to maybe separate them, maybe you should have two accounts?
I mean, legally, go ahead and then I'll.
Sure. So the critical question is going to be, are you acting in your personal capacity, or are you using district time, resources, anything like that? And once again, this is a very difficult question to answer in a purely hypothetical realm. So it's going to depend on a number of different things, but you really need to make sure that any advocating you're doing for or against somebody is solely in your personal capacity.
The truth of the matter is, though, like legally, we don't have any district time. None of us are paid. We're volunteers. So our time, there's no, I mean, other than like that, we can't use our time in here when we're on the dais, that kind of thing. But I mean,
right.
if we're at home, you know, there's no district time for us, or if we're at work even, we may work for ourselves. So it's, in that capacity, that's not possible. And I think that it's really a good discussion, because where do our First Amendment rights to, you know, for political speech end legally? And I don't know. I mean, I think that, because I see lots of people who are in political office in their role as council people, as state legislators, as Congress, they advocate for other people. They do all kinds of stuff. And so I think that in terms of, you know, legal prohibitions for us, it's pretty limited, because political speech is very protected.
Right. So I would say, I think that we're probably not posted for a conversation about the limits of trustee speech beyond the parameters of BBBD legal, which is specific to the use of district time and resources. So I'm really trying to keep us focused on what we're posted for. To the extent that you're seeking advice regarding the limits of your free speech, I think that we would need to be posted for that. And I think that perhaps that's something that Mr. Ponick might want to weigh in on. Yes, Mr. Moses. Sorry.
Yeah, Mr. Moses.
No, you actually went kind of where I was going to go. I thought we were kind of zagging and zagging there and got a little bit off the strictness of it. Can you speak to us real quick? I think this is important, about the difference, or if there even is one, between, let's just say, for example, a candidate putting something or using district resources and putting them either in the teachers' boxes or distributing them around campus or whatever, and let's just say a supporter of one of theirs doing that. Is there a difference as far as where that ultimate liability falls? Because as I understand it, it's even if the candidate doesn't have knowledge, but a supporter did it on their behalf, they still are at that point at risk of running afoul. My point there is just we all need to be knowledgeable that even if whoever's running, they're the ones who ultimately are liable for even someone doing something that they don't know about.
I think that may even be beyond the scope of our posting, because now you're getting into...
Okay, I was not the legal policy. Sorry, my fault if I did.
Okay, but now you're getting into rules related to things that the Ethics Commission would have jurisdiction over. So the district's policy is related to the use of district resources. None of our personnel, the district cannot use funds to support any measure.
We're good now. Okay. Sorry, you're right. We were off topic there. Let's move on.
Okay, so maybe if we want to continue that conversation, we need to post it a little bit differently moving forward. Did anybody else have any questions?
Just, I hit my light. I don't know if it's turned on or not. I can never tell, but I'll make a quick comment here. So this time 2 years ago, we were looking at a bond, and there was a big discussion about whether using school resources, and this was something that the TASB conferences and their legal department go over quite a bit, is can you use district resources to advocate for a bond? Technically, the word is no, you can't, but you can state facts. So there's a very fine line of, or maybe it's a very gray line of whatever a statement of fact is versus an advocacy for. So if you said there's a leaky roof in a building, it needs to be replaced, is that advocating or is that a statement of fact? And the answer is probably both. So with that, since none of us on this dais and none of the current trustees are running again, this is the first time I think I've ever known this to happen, at least since I've been aware of the board, that there has been no incumbent, except when in 2008, they canceled the election because they had to get some people, they had to recruit people, and they canceled the election because there were no contested races. So this is a unique scenario, and I'm glad to see that there's active community involvement and people who are watching and watch regularly and participate and are very involved. Whereas this time, 12 years ago, there was, like I said, they had to go out and grab people. So with that, I say there's plenty of gray area, freedom of speech, things like that. We could talk about it more at another time, but I don't think any of us waive our right to free speech as long as we're not up here advocating. We put a sign up here for any one candidate or bond or whatever. So anyway, I think there's always room for improvement, but otherwise I think it runs pretty smoothly.
All right. Thank you. I don't see any other questions. So we will move on to J, our action items for consideration by consent.
I move to approve agenda items J 1 through 12 for consideration by consent.
Second.
Okay. We have a motion and a second to approve items J 1 through 12 for consideration by consent.
I do have a request, if you're going to take a comment. Can
Yes.
I get a real quick, like 1 minute overview on the tax rate, number 4, from Dr. Goddix? Sorry, I don't mean to put you on the spot quite like that, but I just wanted to make a statement that, we're adopting this tax rate, and I think it's going down, what'd you say, 1.1% in the presentation, so just make a...
Okay. Yeah. So the tax rate, as we talked about is no different than what we did during the budget development piece. So there's two tax rates, one for the M&O, pays the operating costs, salaries, light bill. The other is the INS for the repayment of the bond fund. And so starting with the INS tax rate of 0.2648, that's unchanged from where it currently is. On the M&O side, that tax rate, and this is per what happened with House Bill 3, that tax rate is actually being lowered. It's currently at 97 cents. And to get sort of real technical, people on the board know that that's actually comprised of two components, a Tier 1 tax rate that's currently at 93 cents, and then golden pennies, there's 4 golden pennies, so you sum those two together, you get the 97 cents. With the way House Bill 3 works, we're not changing the golden pennies, those are still staying at 4 cents, but the Tier 1 tax rate is being compressed down from the 93 cents to like 91.64, and so the total tax rate of the M&O is 0.9564. So it's falling from 0.97 to 0.964, a little over a penny. And so the total tax rate of both of those together is $1.22 and 0.12. So that's what's being proposed for your approval tonight.
And I think it was pretty close to what you estimated when we did our budget, too. So that was awesome. Does anyone else have any questions? All right, so we have a motion and a second to approve action items J1 through 12 as presented for consent. All those in favor, raise your hand. All right, we have 6-0. Thank you. Now we will move on to item K1, the aquatic practice facility.
Yes, thank you, President Weir and Dr. Flores and trustee members. It brings me great pleasure to bring this item to the trustees for consideration tonight. I'm going to give just a little bit of background in the work that's gone into getting to this project for consideration. If you recall, in 2018, August of 2018, the trustees then empaneled made a pivot as we were going through hearings in regard to creating a line item for a practice pool. And this practice pool was designated as an athletic facility, and it was not originally recommended by the Citizen Bond Committee. And so we made that pivot late in our public hearings, and we created this line item. And so we began working on this project as we came through that bond with the very specific task to work on a project that I use the terminology as bond target. We're going to design a facility on bond target. And of course, at that time, the Facility and Finance Committee was active. And so this was a year ago that we've looked at this project a couple of times, knowing that there was a community interest in creating what we call a warm water pool. And so we tried to be very, very thoughtful in how we would design a practice pool that was very specific to bond target and the dollars that we had on bond target, as well as an addition that could be easily added to this facility as a warm water pool, and to use that warm water pool for education in swimming and things of that nature. So we have worked extraordinarily hard to, I use the metaphor, put 10 pounds in a 3-pound sack. And we have been able to accomplish this project by and large fundamentally on budget within the bond for the basic athletic pool. And we even expanded our scope so that in our design process, we learned that UIL was going to allow diving and, as we've heard the young lady speaker tonight, water polo. So we've designed this pool so that technically, and we have some graphics, and I'm going to ask Jennifer to bring those graphics up now just real quickly, that we can have 3 teams in this pool practicing laterally at a time in 8 lanes. And so one of the things that we also have done is that we have taken, and Jennifer, if you'll just go to the next slide, we have taken a second project, a parking project for Cedar Ridge High School, and added to this project. So you'll see at Cedar Ridge High School, after studying several sites at Cedar Ridge High School, the aquatic practice pool will be on the west side of the boulevard, the entry boulevard off Gaddis Road, across the street from the auditorium. These 2 projects will face each other. There's approximately 200 parking spaces that will be adjacent and available and adjacent to the auditorium or across the boulevard. And you'll see that there is an area just north of the main practice pool, the longer box. And we've been able to design this parking and fire lane so that we can accommodate car line, a longer car line, so we don't have as many cars line up on the boulevard and out onto Gaddis Road. Jennifer, if you go to the next slide. So you'll see the long rectangular box. That is actually our practice pool. And then just to the top of the page is the warm water pool, and you'll be able to see that in scale. And the facilities just to the right are restroom facilities, and those are all code compliant facilities that we must design into the facility. There are several features about this pool that are important to note as we begin to consider it tonight. One, it has a system called a CHP, that's a combined heat power production system, in that as we heat the water, we create power so that this facility becomes much, much more efficient to operate. 2 is that at the far left end, the deep end, we're able to create what we call a dive well. So we're able to accommodate UIL diving, 1 meter diving, as well as it's deep enough to be able to accommodate water polo too. So consequently, the scope is just a little larger than what we originally had planned back in 2018, but we're able to get all those features into this project. And so tonight, just fiscally being as responsible to the original bond call and bond project line, it's my duty to recommend the basic practice pool. However, as you all as trustees have the option to add the water, the warm water feature to that. And so that is not a recommendation I have tonight. That can always be added easily to the project later on and or subsequent years as necessary. And from that point, then you'll note that the cost for the warm water pool is just under $5 million. It's 4.7 and some. And the cost for the practice pool is $17 million, which includes contingencies and things of that nature. So with that, I'll stop talking and see if you have any questions of me.
Ms. Feller?
Did you call on me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Ms. Feller, sorry.
So can you go back and I thought I heard you say that it was not recommended from the CBC to have the warm water pool.
Yes, the original recommendation from the Citizen Bond Committee in 2018 was not to have an aquatic center at all, and it pivoted to at that point in time, after discussion and community input, we pivoted to add an aquatic facility, but the aquatic facility was to be an athletic practice pool within that bond discussion.
So you're talking about the committee that I ran. And so are you saying that the district originally didn't recommend having an aquatic facility, but the Citizens Bond Committee actually is what rebirthed it or gave it life, and that's how it ended up getting on the bond? Is that?
No, opposite. He said it was a community interest to request of the trustees impaneled at that time to consider aquatic center, but it was not a recommendation of the Citizen Bond Committee. And so this project went into that project based upon discussions with the community at that time as an athletic facility.
So just by my recollection, I was pretty sure that we talked about a warm water pool back in those days because we really talked about the application for greater use, especially by our special education community and our elementary education students, that they would be able to access that facility, learn to swim, things like that. And so it's been a while. I have to go back and look at my notes. But I seem to recall that we had those discussions back in 2018.
There was...
I know that we were constrained by price.
Yes.
And really it came down to the original recommendation was around $25 million, I think, is when it came in, all bells and whistles. And then there were some activists that really were like, let's look at the Fort Bend ISD pool and let's see what we can do to recreate that kind of facility here in the district. And then the totals of the bond just kept getting higher and higher, and said, okay, what can we do to still put something into this community, because we haven't put anything into that community for 30 some odd years or more of swimmers. And so that's where we ended up on the $16 or so million facility. I thought that still included a warm water pool at that point. I still will advocate that I think that that's really important, that if we're only going to have one facility in the district, then I don't know when our next bond is going to be. Thank God we don't have a bond this November.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I will still advocate for the fact that I think that is a really needed asset for a lot of, not only the swimmers that use it, but for the other parts of the community that of our students that can use it.
Ms. Vessa, and then I see you, Mr. Moses.
Yeah. So my recollection was that in the end, when the final CBC recommendation came to the board, it did not include an aquatic facility at all. It was a 1 rated, but it didn't make the final cut. And then the board, as Mr. Wooster was saying, made that pivot to add it. But my question has to do with the $4.7 million cost. So do we have bond funds available to cover that cost, or would that be a fund balance allocation?
We have fund balance available. However, as you'll find next week, that there's many competitions for the fund balance dollars that can go into projects. And so, again, the study in facilities next week is such that we need to show some of those competitions for different projects.
So when you say fund balance, you're talking about bond fund balance dollars, not general fund balance dollars.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
That's correct.
And Mr. Moses, and then Mr. Chadwell. Mr. Moses, you're.
Thank you, Madam President. And yes, Trustee Vessa, you're right. It did come on board without being recommended, and then through those conversations, we added it, but it really was very much here's the dollar amount where we feel comfortable putting towards this project. What can we get for it? And we came up with something that looked like the pool down in Fort Bend, and that's kind of where we landed at today. And first, Mr. Lucer, thank you so much for bringing this up. I know this is an exciting time for our swim community to see this begin to really move forward. It is a good thing for the district. And I think down the road, like a warm water facility would make sense. But I think, one, to your point, and we are going to get a lot more information next week about other projects that need attention. And, some of that's going to be stuff that's been on the list for a long time that is going to be affecting our campuses, and others going to be, I wouldn't be shocked if through COVID we've seen some things that we need to do differently on our facilities just to make those adjustments. So I think at this time, sticking with what we told the voters, being the motion language, and just understanding that we're going to have to come back at a later date if we want to do a warm water pool. I think that's just where we're at least at this for the time we're at right now. And I think you said Mr. Chadwell, Madam President, but if he's good, I'll make a motion.
Did you have a statement, Mr. Chadwell?
I want to make a couple quick comments as well. So, and then I'll get to the point. I do think it's very important that we stay within our scope, or whatever the title, whatever we call it. There's plenty to do with this, and with this amount you can do it. I do know that long term, and as long as you can add it, and there's not going to be a significant cost to it. But I do remember that the bond, there was no plans for it until almost the last minute, and then it came back. The original plan was very large, and then you came back and you said, well, this will be a practice facility. It won't be the largest with seating for visitors, and it won't meet all the requirements to have the biggest meets and things like that, but it will be a great first start. And I remember we said it many times, we have to, I always think that when you sell a bond, when you advocate for a bond, you are creating a contract with a community that you're saying you're going to go out and you're going to stay within the bounds as much as you can. Now, things do change, and I think that there are options where you need to do it. But in this case, there are plenty of things to keep it busy between water polo, swimming, all of the activity. And in light of the fact that COVID and all of the expenses that we have going on and the changes, and if next year we decide to amend the budget and add to it, I would hope that it's not, we or whoever's here, you all could decide to add it at any point. So my recommendation is get started on this, abide by the contract or the agreement that we had with the voters, which was to stay in bounds of this number. And then later on, hopefully, there will be such a large demand for swimmers that you can even add another facility on another side of the district in the center, and it'll be everything you ever wanted. So, but that'll be a future bond a couple years out. Mr. Moses.
Yeah. Mr. Moses, would you like to go ahead and make your motion?
Okay. Mr. Chadwell, I appreciate you recognizing it. I wanted to make sure there wasn't, and you said there wasn't anybody else who was. Going to say anything. So yes, Madam President, I move that the board approve the use of $17,150,482 of bond 2018 funds for the Bond Target Aquatic Practice Facility project as presented.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to approve the use of this $17,150,482 of Bond 2018 funds for the Bond Target Aquatic Practice Facility project as presented. Are there any further comments from the board? Ms. Feller.
Can I ask that you bring the warm water pool next week at the facilities committee so that we have all of the projects that we're considering for the leftover funds?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, what you'll see is that you'll see a list of numerous projects, and so that warm water component is part of that list of projects that we've been using the terminology non-bond funded and/or would compete for capital dollars from that point. And so, yes, it will be up for consideration.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Are there any further comments? All right, so we have a motion and a second. All those in favor, raise your hand. All right, it passes 6-0. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, and that brings us to board announcements and requests for future agenda items. As Mr. Worcester said, we do have facilities next week, and we were going to add policy that we had left off from September 3rd also. Mr. Chadwell.
Yes, I'd like to make a request either next week or our next meeting, an update on two items. One is the equity officer, the position on that, a quick review of that. We've been seeing a lot of emails on that. I know there's been discussion, and even though it was approved, I think there's a lot of questions that have come up recently over that. So, and the other one is kind of related to that is the police department, the progress on that, what's going on, are there any, what's being planned on that. So those, like I said, those are kind of related. The position right now for the equity officer, chief equity officer, is posted, and would certainly like to get an update on that and just make sure that the community is behind it. Whatever the district does, the community is fully behind it, and also with the PD in light of what's going on everywhere. Thank you.
All right. Dr. Flores, do you have sort of an idea of when we could get an update on those two things?
Actually, yes. I met with Daryl Emanuel and Annette Vieira just this week to finalize some of the processing. So I'll have we don't have a board update tomorrow, but I will give you, we're ready to provide that information and any clarity or points of clarity that are needed after that. And I think, feel free to comment on. So you'll have that tomorrow.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right. Were there any other? Sorry, Ms. Feller.
Just real quick, I do have a quick question. So on the agendas, we just voted on the consent. We did the some of the projects for, I think, McNeil High School Master Plan, I think Hernandez Weight Room. We did several things. Anyway, there's the chart in here, and this goes back to what the scoring. So maybe next week at the facilities, we could have a quick discussion on how vendors are chosen, architects and contractors are chosen for projects. And, we see the spreadsheet here. It says Braun and Butler, Built Right, Cheney Cox, Falkenberg. And then, we had a big discussion about that on the turf a few months ago, and there was some questions. So I don't know if we could add that to the facilities committee discussion. Thank you.
All right. Ms. Feller?
Yes, I'd like to, I know that we already have an agenda item that's been requested by a couple of trustees for the discussion of Lighthouse reports against trustees and how they are evaluated. So I'd like to get that on our agenda as well and how they're distributed to other trustees.
Yes, and as I said in the email, Ms. Becerta will have that information for us enclosed next week, and then she will have, as part of our policy discussion that we did not get to on the 3rd, her recommendations for how we're going to go forward. All right, I don't see anything else. So I do not believe we need to go into closed session again. So it is 8:58, and if there are no objections, we are adjourned.